The following is the agenda for the regular council meeting of the Borough of Pompton Lakes Mayor and Council and Municipal Corporation in the County of Passaic. The meeting will begin at 7:30 p.m. on May 10th, 2023 in the Municipal Building, 25 Lenox Avenue, Pompton Lakes, consistent with the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act. The meeting will be open for public comments and shall be in accordance with the terms and conditions of the Borough's Municipal Code and bylaws.
Please stand for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please bless this mayor and council as they deliberate on the best of Pompton Lakes. In conformance with the Open Public Meeting Law, Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this meeting setting forth the time, date, place, and purpose of this regular meeting through notice posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, mailed to all, have requested and paid for same, and published in the Suburban Trends. Roll call, please.
Mayor Sarah.
Here.
Council President Polidori. Here. Councilman Day.
We'll come back to that one.
Okay. Councilman Cruz.
Here.
Councilman Delaney.
Here.
Councilwoman Kent. Here. Councilman Brennan.
Here.
With us this evening is our Borough Attorney, Mark Camarero, and our Borough Administrator, Paula Cazarelli.
Okay, before we get to the redevelopment agency, I have something for the council here. Bill is on the video right now, but after talking to our attorney, I can make a motion I'd like to make a motion now to extend the leave of absence for William Begg until he's back up on his feet. We're hoping that he was ready to take the meeting today on camera. He was all set. He's still going to listen to the meeting, by the way. But the attorney advised me we can do a leave of absence. So I'd like to make a motion. Can I have a second?
I'll second. Are we going to have discussion?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Second?
I'll second this.
Discussion?
So, just for the public's purpose, why are we making this motion? Why is it necessary to do so with Bill's absence relative to just not taking any action whatsoever?
Sure. So pursuant to the municipal vacancy law, when an elected official misses 8 weeks worth of mandatory meetings, required meetings, that could be deemed to be a basis for the seat to become vacant. In order to avoid the seat from becoming vacant, there can be a motion to excuse and grant a leave of absence for that individual. In this particular case, if that was going to be entertained by the governing body, I think that the motion should be an excused absence from March 22nd, which was his last meeting, up through into the future until further notice. You could handle it that way. You could say that you're going to grant the excused leave for a duration, so that you reconsider it, 2 months from now. That type of situation. There is no limit on what the leave of absence to be granted would be. So you can leave it to be revisited on a date certain or just open-ended, but it would start from the day after his last meeting.
Any other questions, concerns?
If we do set a date on it, can it be then revised to, can it be further extended after an initial meeting?
Correct.
It's a good point.
Yes. So if you wanted to put a sunset provision on this, to be revisited and voted again, you could do it for, second meeting in June or some meeting later there, It would seem a little pointless to move it sooner than the second meeting in June, I would think.
Right.
But the second meeting in June or some later date, then that would be fine.
All right, so,
I'm sorry. And I would just say that the motion be specifically addressed to do that it's an excused absence from March 23 up through whatever the council meeting date is, at which time the absence will be reconsidered if necessary.
Okay.
all right, so I went and saw him Friday. He's getting much better. His things are improving steadily. They have him in a regular room now. He's not in any ICU or anything like that. So he's improving steadily, and hopefully, the goal is to get him back home and up on his feet and doing what he's got to do. I can't tell you a time frame. I don't think his son can tell you that time frame, or Bill can tell you that time frame. I did give Bill the option to, think about stepping down, and it was his decision to stay on, and I'm gonna honor that decision right now. I'll entertain if somebody wants to throw a date out or not throw a date out, that's up to you guys.
You know, it's great to hear that Bill is recovering, and I'm really glad to see that, and I really do hope he's up here. I think I have some concerns about just an open-ended, process, and to me, I guess if I was gonna come up with a number or a date, I might look at the council meeting in July, which I think we only have
It's
one.
the 14th.
Which would be
I'm okay.
July 14th, and that would basically essentially be
Yeah.
2 months
I think
to
that's
at least
fair.
revisit this
Yeah,
process.
I'm okay with that. Is everybody okay with July
So
14th?
that's formally a motion to amend, to give the sunset provision of July 14th.
Correct, yes.
From March 23rd to July 14th, at which time will we reconsider?
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then we just need a second on the amendment.
Well, any discussion first on that?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not sure why we're even discussing somebody's, I'm on the Personnel Committee. I didn't get any notice of this.
This is
kind
not
of thing.
about a personnel
He's-
decision. This is about him on the phone right now, ready to take the meeting on.
Where is he? Where is he?
He's on the phone right now.
I guess I have a question as to how we knew and walking into this with no prior knowledge of it, with no,
There's nothing to do. He's here to take the meeting. If you guys voted no, he's ready to go forward and be on the meeting, and then there's no statute that says he can't, just like you missed meetings before, you can do it on the phone. He's on the phone right now, ready to, and he's gonna be on video after the presentation, if that's the way we decide
Why
to
is he
go.
not on now, Mike?
He is, he's not recording
Well,
it.
why is he not speaking? I'm not sure why he's not speaking.
Because right now, he has an issue with that.
There's a medical issue that we can't go into depth in public on.
but we knew that. I'm curious as to why we're just being sat down to this as we walk in now. Why wasn't this discussed in advance of this?
There's no discussion on the advance of this. He's here to take the meeting. If you guys vote no, he'll take the meeting, and he'll be fine, and he can do another 3 meetings missing. This is to,
He can stay, wait a minute. He can stay for this meeting. If he's on the meeting,
no, he's gonna stay for the meeting either
Oh,
way.
then how is he out of,
Because 8 weeks would be
Compliance.
next week if he decides not to finish this meeting, because we have a redevelopment meeting right now.
okay, I mean, I don't want to hold up on the redevelopment meeting. I just don't understand why he's just not on the meeting. He's in the meeting, so he's in attendance, am I correct?
No, he has to be on video. He would have to be on video right now.
We've had people I've personally been on the phone
Yes.
without my
Video or
face.
phone, but there's a
Right now, at this
medical
moment.
issue that's preventing.
At this moment, there's a medical issue for making him speak. For now, right this second.
We,
So he could participate verbally, not verbally, non-verbally on video, or we could have a motion granted to grant him leave for a period of time within which he should be able to get to the point where he could participate.
I just have some concerns as to how we walked in completely unknowing that any of this was happening, and are now being asked to answer this without any, we've known that Bill has missed many meetings. I'm not sure why we didn't have this discussion before.
All right, with that, I'll take a motion. I have a motion. Could I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, you want a roll call?
Do a roll call.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Kent,
no.
Councilwoman Polidori,
No.
Councilman Bennett,
Yes.
Councilman Begg doesn't count, I don't
No.
include him in it.
Well, does he count on this?
No, it's not visible.
If he's not in the meeting,
He's
Well, he
in
is
the meeting.
I'd say
He's
no.
in
I'm gonna
the
say
meeting.
no.
you'd have to put him on video so we can see what his vote is.
Right, let's
You
go
want me to
first.
go through?
Well, no, let's see what the vote is first, yeah.
The reality is, he's asking for a leave of absence, I suppose.
Mhm.
If he's in the meeting, he should be voting, although this is incredibly
Which is why I don't understand how
What
we're
are we
doing it
doing?
this way. This doesn't make any sense to me. We're forcing an issue. No one really understands.
Yes, there is an
the
issue,
process.
because by 8 weeks would be
Then you
next
should-
week.
Then you should have brought this up sooner.
No, this is what he
There
wanted.
are medical issues.
There's medical issues involved here.
that are
It's been a long standing.
We have
Yeah,
right now,
yeah.
we have an employee, I can't mention any names, but they have to provide a doctor's note to just even to work. And I'm just used to going that road.
There's no doctor's note
This,
involved.
this isn't motivated by personnel, this is motivated by the municipal vacancy law. The purpose of this is to excuse him so that his seat is not deemed vacant while he's recovering from his medical condition, this would have a sunset that you could reevaluate it on July 14th if he doesn't recover. If we know that he has an issue, you could use that as your good faith basis upon which to cast your vote. I understand that people are aware from personal experience of what the situation is. It isn't up for the public to know the details of that,
No, but we're talking about it in front of everybody.
because
We
we need to
have
have a
to.
vote.
We need to take a vote. So continue, Liz, please.
Councilman Cruz?
It's ridiculous. I've never seen anything like this.
I feel like we're rushing into this. Yes, to July, what's the day we're setting for to sunset this?
14th?
14th. At that point, I would expect all the information that is needed to make an intelligent decision on whether or not he can proceed with the board by that time. Not on video, non-verbal.
Well, no, he can still do video and verbal.
Yeah, at this point from the hospital, we know very well he can't because of the condition that he's in right now.
No, if he can,
It's permissive,
What is it?
participation in these meetings, even if you were
to say no.
down the shore and you want to participate, you could participate electronically, that's fine. So if a council person was to participate into these meetings electronically for any reason, that's permissible under the Open Public Meetings Act. This is just an excuse absence from him participating in council meetings from the 23rd through the July 14th.
And
In
my,
which case, if he's requesting an extended leave, it'll be reconsidered at that point in time.
and my guess is he will be here before that.
Did this
Either on
just come up a
video-
half hour before this meeting? We didn't know about this earlier.
You all know
There was
about
no
this.
way to have a
We didn't know
discussion
about this.
You
We-
all know
I'm not
about this, and
comfortable
we
making
don't know.
decisions.
Well, you made your decision already. You said no. So we're moving on to the vote.
I expect some grace and courtesy to
I-
understand what I'm
Okay,
doing.
but
while I'm
right now, we're at the voting stage, okay?
Because you cut me off when I was speaking
No.
before.
I'm taking a vote. So I'm to Bobby now to vote.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's 3-2.
Councilman Deline?
Well, he had the motion.
Yeah, that's the last one, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, Council.
Yes, July 14th.
Okay, so we will revisit this on July 14th. Hopefully, with all good intentions, Councilman Begg will be back before then, either on video, in person, or on the phone. But we will revisit it either way, July 14th. So thank you. Okay, so now let's move on to our redevelopment presentation. With us, in front of us, is Debbie Lawler, one of our planners here for the town, and Andy Brewer, the attorney for redevelopment and the planning board and the zoning board. So the redevelopment agency had decided they wanted to get some information out. It's been a long time since they presented to the boards. They did this a couple years ago, so we'll see how that goes. So take it away.
Thank you, Mayor, Council President, members of the council. As the Mayor introduced, my name is Andy Brewer. Just real briefly about me. As you said, I represent redevelopment agency, planning board, and zoning board. Actually grew up in Pompton Lakes, been here many years. Love the town quite a bit. And I think what we're hoping to do is talk about how redevelopment is done in Pompton Lakes and kind of go through a little bit of the historical process, why it arose, and how certain decisions were made.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say one thing.
Sure.
Any of the council, if you want to jump in and ask a question, go ahead. The public will do that at the end when we take questions, but for the council, if you have a concern or question, just ask. Okay.
So in the redevelopment process, there's the governing body, planning board and the redevelopment agency, they all have different roles. And just for a little fun, as I said, I've been here a long time. Back there, this is a picture,
He's got a microphone.
that's taken in 1979, over Joe Blackfield. And the sign behind me is Gelman's. It's a hand-printed Gelman's, which is one of the big stores in town. Gelman's, Zingers, and Rex, and that's me. So just gives you a little historical perspective. I have been here a while, and I love the town. This is me cleaning out from the flood in 1984. Back to what we're doing, redevelopment designation. So on a 40,000-foot view, kind of looking over top, why does redevelopment exist? The New Jersey State Legislature has recognized that occasionally there are problems. Zoning just doesn't solve things. And so the New Jersey Legislature allows for redevelopment to occur. And that is really, we used to call it blighted areas, and then there are certain additional powers that are given to a municipality to exercise once that happens. So the first process is designation. This, just on the timing, going back historically, Pompton Lakes decided around 2006, 2007 to go through this process. In 2008, most of the downtown, we know Wanacue Avenue, the downtown, was designated as an area in need of redevelopment. But we kind of go through this process starts with the governing body, and the governing body has the biggest role here. Actually, we were talking about Deb, if you wanted to go through the process a little bit, but the governing body is the first role here, it always has this role.
Okay, so what happens at the beginning is that there are two parts to the process. There's an area in need of redevelopment investigation, which is the very first thing that is done, and the second part is a redevelopment plan. So a redevelopment investigation is generally initiated by the council. It could be a potential developer having an interest in the town, but doesn't think that the project could be pulled off without working hand in hand with the municipality in some way to make it work. So they bring the concept to the town. The alternative is also that you have a piece of property that's sitting for a long time and nothing is happening. It's basically lost its economic vitality, and the town is trying to figure out how to get interest in this. Some of the things that have taken place in the past, things like the Dumont site, or there was the Lytle property before that, some of the parts that go along with the investigation deal with 8 criteria. So you have proofs that go along with this that have to be made. And generally when we come and we explain it, we're told, what the lot and block is. It doesn't matter whether there's a developer or not a developer involved. We basically are looking strictly at a site. So again, the whole process is starting with the council asking the planning board to have the site investigated. And the power is with the planning board to get the investigation done.
But it doesn't start unless this governing body instructs the planning board
Absolutely.
to have a planner perform the investigation.
That's right.
So it starts with official action of the government.
That's a statutory
That's right.
role, and that's the only entity that can start the process or end the process.
And that's the Anito study that
That's
was
right.
presented.
Generally, it's called in need of redevelopment, in need of rehabilitation. Sometimes you hear it called a preliminary investigation.
So the process is to hold the hearing, and then the planning board makes recommendations. That's the planning board role, it's a statutory role. It's the only entity that can actually do that. They make recommendations on the area that were recommended by the governing body, goes back, and then the governing body looks at that hearing, looks at the evidence and the report, everything that happened on it, and decides, all right, do we designate it as an area needed redevelopment or not? And that's something this governing body and the planning board did back in 2008. For the bulk of Wanacue Avenue, the downtown the redevelopment area, there's been bits and pieces at the time. Bob Beneke, who was the planner, kind of had a process where individual property owners could opt out. And so rather than having complete one unified area, you have some.
Just explain where Bob Beneke fit into this picture.
Sure, Bob, way back then in 2008, and actually I didn't start getting involved until 2012 in the planning board, but Bob Beneke was the planner that put together the study, looked at the downtown Wanacue Avenue and whether or not it should be designated an area needed redevelopment. And I say that colloquially, and there's other little bits and pieces, but by and large, it's the Wanacue Avenue corridor that we're talking about. And because there are a lot of individual properties, the decision was made at the time also that Pompton Lake should not exercise the power of eminent domain. That has good and bad things. The good thing is, politically, you don't want to be taking property from a mom and pop property owner or an individual. The bad thing about it is that you don't have the leverage to force redevelopment to happen to some extent. When you have that leverage, that you can get the property and put together assemblage, but that was a political decision that was made.
So let's just repeat that. So we don't use eminent domain here for redevelopment.
You decided not to do in 2008.
And that's in the writing in the agreement with the state?
That is in your designation back in 2008, and everything since then, you've done it as a non-condemnation area. You have, and then in your redevelopment plan, and also in your redevelopment plan, which comes next, that's your zoning, and you have, it has to be in there, or properties to be acquired. And since you can't acquire them through eminent domain, there are none. You don't acquire them, you don't have that power. You could have that power if you went through the process again, but Pompton Lakes decided not to do that. That was a political and economic decision, and towns go both ways. But that was the decision of Pompton Lakes, so you don't have, you did not get yourself that power. You could have, you did not. So anyway, Bob Beneke, the way he proposed the plan in the governing body in 2006 and 7 and 8, when this process was going forward, was the entire, most of the Wanacue Avenue corridor. But then individual property owners were given the option that if they did not want their property included, it would get taken out, and then the planning board and the governing body would not designate. So they had like an opt-out provision. So there are several different donut holes in down the Wanacue. So every once in a while, it makes, if you want to have a unified chunk, you have to either convince that property owner to be part of it or go through the designation process, which you've done. You have several times recommended that the planning board go through and just look at some other individual infills that had opted out. And so
And there was no reason you could just say, I opt out, and there was no explanation of why or anything.
At the time, I believe that there was no explanation.
You just opt out if you wanted out. And by the way, at the time, I had just started with the redevelopment at that point. A lot of businesses were unsure. They didn't know what the redevelopment was, so they said, I want no part of this, and they opted out. That's just reasoning because there wasn't enough information out there yet on it.
So that's what happened then. That is back in 2008 when Pompton Lakes first designated that your redevelopment area. Then you move on to a redevelopment plan, which is your zoning. And as I said, the New Jersey's legislature has recognized that areas that are in need of redevelopment, or we used to call them blighted, need some extra tools. One of the additional tools is once you declare an area in need of redevelopment, you pass a redevelopment plan, which is essentially the alternate zoning for the property, for that area. It can and often is different than the underlying zoning. Essentially, you can give benefits to encourage that development. The regular old planning didn't do it, so additional tools are there. Let Deb talk about a redevelopment plan and its adoption. Again, there are roles of the governing body and the planning board in this. Those are the only statutory entities that have those.
So in the redevelopment plan, and this is after it's been deemed in need of redevelopment, generally you start to set the stage for what that development would be and how you would like it to look. So you have, your standard like bulk type information and the uses. Now in a redevelopment plan, the big difference in terms of variances, like when it goes later on to a planning board to actually get built, is that you can't have use variances taking place. So if anything, they would have to come back and re-amend a plan to allow uses that are not listed. So it's very specific that once the council adopts the plan, those are the uses that are permitted. Anything else, no board can grant other uses outside of the permitted uses in a redevelopment plan. The bulk, generally, if it's something that is like a regular bulk standard, like a setback or something, we generally write into the redevelopment plan that the planning board can handle that, rather than having to go back and amend the plan. Redevelopment plans can supersede the underlying zoning or be an overlay. In most cases, if you're really trying to get revitalization, you do look to supersede it so that you're not getting just what was left of the old zoning, because a lot of times that may have been less than what you really want to see. Once you start to see redevelopment taking place in an area, a lot of it gets revitalized, you lose the control of the look that you're establishing through redevelopment. So one thing that is important under redevelopment is that you can actually control the appearance. That's very difficult to do under regular zoning. Under regular zoning, you're controlling height, you're controlling setbacks, you're controlling basically the massing of a development. Under redevelopment, you could actually say, you know what, our town doesn't want ultra-modern buildings on our main street when we're going with a more traditional style of architecture. Or we don't want you putting in like, you know, a bright blue building on Main Street. And I actually saw this happen in another town that didn't have those types of regulations, or, you know, the purple sneaker store that was going up for a while. You can control that with redevelopment. You could say, you know, we want brick colors in this range so that our downtown starts to have some consistency to it. We regulated signage very heavily in terms of look to try to get more consistency. And it evolves over time. When you have a downtown that you're doing, you want to try to control it so that you have full control over the look of it. And that's why it's important that the council sets the plan, and then ultimately the planning board is carrying it through, and the redevelopment agency, which Andy will get into, is kind of setting the stage for the negotiations that take place to get that look that you want. So Andy, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Again, really, just quick on the roles, but again, these are statutory roles, they can't be changed. The redevelopment plan is, it's an ordinance, it's your zoning for that defined area, and just like every other zoning ordinance, goes from the governing body to the planning board for a review of consistency with the master plan and any other thing that they want to talk about, and then back to the governing body, the only place we go. And as you all may recall, occasionally there is a project that will come where there is a desire to change the height or change the setback or change some things. That can only happen by you. So if there is a request to change, to alter the redevelopment plan, that has come back on a recommendation. That's always the only power that is in you to do that. And that's happened on occasion where on a particular project or an area, you've changed the zoning or the redevelopment plan a little bit to accommodate what appears to be a project that
Before we move on, just a couple of questions. Debbie, you said, you know, again, in a redevelopment plan, you can't grant relief from permitted uses within that redevelopment zone. Speaking a little bit into the planner language, that's one type of D variances, for lack of a better word. Does the planning board have the ability to grant variances to other types of D variances like floor ratio, density, height above 10%, or does that become a different kind of relief as well?
Those are always D variances, and those could only go to the zoning board of adjustment. So those D variances, you know, in the local redevelopment housing law, essentially says that the redevelopment always has to go through municipal land use law. So that regular process, if it's going to be a D variance, that can only be by the board of adjustment.
Okay.
And if it is a C variance, if it's a permitted, that.
So the Board of Adjustment does have the ability to grant a use variance within a redevelopment zone. It doesn't necessarily.
That's an
That's what I'm saying.
discussion, because any agreement, any redevelopment, this takes about 3 parts, sorry. Any redevelopment agreement between either the municipality or the redevelopment agency, depending on how you exercise your power, any agreement with redeveloper has to have a provision that says you will only use this property for uses that are permitted in the redevelopment zone, redevelopment area. However, by its nature, a board of adjustment gives a variance. It disregards the use. So there is a case out of Trenton that allowed a use variance, so it was a drive-in restaurant in a redevelopment area, because you are saying the zoning, we're going to throw it out and allow a different use. It's very difficult if the Board of Adjustment looks at the proofs, because at this point, they have a master plan that sure says no. They have a redevelopment plan that says no. And to go against that is a colossal undertaking. There are some people who think that Trenton decision was wrong and that power doesn't exist. So that's a debate. The one or two reported decisions seem to indicate, and that's only appellate division, that power still does exist in the Board of Adjustment. It can be restricted by the agreement, but whether or not that power still resides, it's a little bit of an open question.
Okay, and then the second question is relative to specifically our downtown redevelopment area. Do we operate with an overlay, or did that redevelopment zone supersede the underlying zoning?
Superseded.
It's superseded. Okay, thank you.
Page down. So these are the new powers that come with, once the redevelopment plan is in place, that zoning, these new powers kind of spring into being. The power to designate a redeveloper. So normally, if you're under normal zoning, a person owns a property or a company owns a property, they can go to the planning board for site plan approval. Here, when you have a redevelopment area and redevelopment plan, that plan can have a provision, as does the Pompton Lakes plan, that only the designated redeveloper can proceed to the planning board to go get site plan approval. So you have the power to basically restrict who's going to be developing, to contract with the redeveloper, to have a redevelopment agreement say, we're going to do X, it's going to be, as Deb said, it's going to be all pretty green, it's going to be classic gas type structures, it's going to be 6/6 windows, whatever you want, it's going to be this size, all that. So you have a contract with them when they're going to build it, what they're going to do. You have the ability to do that. You can have tax exemption, financial agreements or pilots. That's a whole discussion of itself, but again, the 40,000-foot view, redevelopment, the New Jersey legislature has recognized something's wrong. So this additional power that you can or cannot, it's your choice, and only the governing body can do that, again, can give a tax exemption, and rather than pay otherwise taxes, they pay what's called an annual service charge in a financial agreement. It's a negotiated amount. If the reason that this development has not happened is because it's so financially constrained, because there's no parking, the building is difficult, or for whatever reason, you can sweeten the pot or change the finances, so rather than pay the full taxes, they pay a negotiated amount. The other part, again, this could fill up a long time. The other part of that is in your normal tax structure, when that entity pays its taxes, roughly, a third goes to the town, third goes to the schools, third goes to the county. You adjust it from town to town. And if you have, and you decide to have a pilot, 95% of the annual service charge goes to the town, 5% goes to the county. That's only on the improvements, the stuff you build, it's not on the land, but the tax structure where the revenue goes is different. And that's a financing thing that the legislature allows. It is not mandatory. You've chosen to do it. In some places, you don't have to do it. So that's another power that comes with this. Selling property without public bidding. This doesn't really happen, although I think that we did transfer a few in the pound total for the development. It was a little bit. Normally, if a municipality wants to sell property, they have to go put it out to bid. If it's in a redevelopment area, you don't have to. There's an understanding that's an additional power. You hopefully get the best deal, but you don't have to do the public bidding. You can do it only with that redevelopment. Redevelopment area bonds are a fundraising tool. It allows bonds to be issued in the name of the municipality, and they can be recourse to the town, so the town's full faith and credit is behind them, or non-recourse. So it is the security for prepayment of the bonds is solely the financial agreement or the pilot. That's another tool that you can use that, again, has some different good and bad aspects of it. If you had questions, I'll do that. You can also provide funding for certain projects.
But just for clarity on that, so the annual service charge is actually dedicated to pay off the bond.
If you have a bond, that's what pays.
So it doesn't come out of the general tax levy, but it does get factored into the bonding caps that the municipality is subject to, correct?
If it is a recourse bond, yes. If it's non-recourse, no, it's not.
So, real quick, going to the pilot tax structure. Again, using your example of, let's say, just say 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Yeah.
And you go to the traditional tax structure of 95 to the municipality and 5% to the county. In the original tax structure, let's just say that the school district is getting $10,000 a year from property taxes of the property prior to redevelopment. And it goes through redevelopment, and now it becomes 95.5. Does that mean that the 10,000 doesn't go to the school anymore, or does the 10,000 still go to the school, but it gets passed through the municipality as part of that 95%?
I'd like to step back and how it's described. When a school sends a bill, the school sends a bill to Pompton Lakes. Each individual property doesn't pay X amount to the school. It asks the borough for the money.
Okay.
The borough pays that money regardless from whether or not you have 100 taxable pieces of property or 1,000 or whatever. It pays the bill and it collects them from its regularly taxed properties.
It's really an allocation by the borough based on what bills it has to pay to these other groups.
Exactly. The bill everybody gets, it shows a percentage for the schools, percentage. This is how we built this bill.
Okay.
Because we have these bills that we have to pay. And so that's how the taxes get assessed to certain properties. But going back to what you said, generally, no. Although with this proviso, the land taxes are always paid. You don't have projects to give it taxes.
As traditionally allocated.
Yes, as always, so you always have to pay your regular tax as they're always done. So the land, that portion goes to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The improvements don't, if you have a pilot. They go to 95%. Theoretically, and this is why you negotiate them well, is that money is fungible. So if you raise more money in that 95%, that would cover your school cost plus something more, then that's less that has to be paid by the entities that are not tax exempt. So yes, it doesn't specifically come from that property, but all the money goes into one pot and then the borough pays its bills.
Okay.
So theoretically, you're putting more into the non-school pot with this, so less has to be paid.
But the school's not necessarily losing out money
School doesn't lose
from the
anything.
result.
There's absolutely no way for the school to lose. If this building is standing, the schools are getting paid. They get paid first, that's it. It's just how it gets out.
And if they need something, if there's more students or whatever happens, then the bill to us would be higher,
Yep.
and then we would have to pay that bill.
Yes.
So that's just where,
That's how it gets done.
Okay.
And there's also one more option here. So your tax bill is traditionally land and improvements. The land is going to stay the same.
Mhm.
The improvements presumably are going to be torn down, re-erected, allocated 95/5. Under the 95/5, the Board of Ed isn't getting a dollar on the improvements, on the vertical. The borough can reach an agreement. It isn't negotiated with them. The borough can choose on its own to allocate some of its revenue to the Board of Ed. Okay, so theoretically, you have a structure that's in existence, not a very lucrative structure from a revenue standpoint, but it still has some taxes that's paying to the Board of Ed. The taxes on the new structure aren't going to be paid to the Board of Ed. So if there's a delta there and the borough wants to make the board whole, it can, if there's enough money in that annual service charge to do so. So there's an option.
I have a question. So the tax payment on the metric you're using to determine what the pilot payment is it equal, more, less than what the tax would be owed on the completed project had it not been a pilot at fair market value?
Almost always it is less.
Less.
That's the only reason, because they would never agree to it, because it's a voluntary agreement. So if the financial agreement and the annual service charge was going to be more than the normal taxes, by law, that entity has the power to get out of that. They would never agree to it if it was more. The only reason it exists as is a financial incentive, as I said, the legislature said, this property in Pompton Lakes, this stretch, it's not being developed. So Pompton Lakes, if they go through this process, has this extra tool. One is to get rid of the normal tax and put something else in its place. But if that total number was more than the regular taxes, they would never agree to it.
So then theoretically, it takes the borough 30 years and a 30-year pilot to recover the full taxation on fair market value of that property.
If you sign up for a 30-year agreement, typically the municipality cannot opt out. That can't be, by statute, you don't have the power to. The entity that enters into the agreement can opt out. Those, it will go back to normal taxes at the conclusion of the financial agreement if it's not terminated for some other reason.
And are the projects in the redevelopment zone still considered part of the rateable base, or are they removed from that?
Rateable base. The land is rate, so that's not tax exempt, that's being taxed. So the land is always taxed. The improvements, every tax bill has your land and the improvements. The improvements are not taxed, they're exempt.
I think that I could add a little bit to that, and Andy, I'm not in your shoes, but I'm often in your shoes, right?
Get away. And all this power is in the governing body. This is always in your power.
So, because, and I think that it's helpful for the public to think about this in a pie chart. It's a big pizza pie. And Andy's using 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but my experience has traditionally been more like 25%, 25%, and 50% of the Board of Ed. Certainly in suburbia. But for the sake of illustration, let's consider 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So that piece of pie is split into 3 pieces, and the borough collects 1 piece. Board of Ed gets a piece, the county gets a piece. Under a pilot, that piece the borough now gets is 95%, and the county gets 5%. And the Board of Ed doesn't get any, but keep in mind that's only for the vertical. So, on the vertical portion, the Board of Ed will collect less from this piece of property than it would under traditional taxes. But the borough, in most cases, as a matter of fact, I've been doing redevelopment for close to 20 years. I've never seen a borough walk out with less money in the pilot than they did under traditional taxes. Now, one thing that I often say in my seminars is, it's not appropriate, it's not an appropriate or a fair comparison to compare what the revenue stream is on a project in the future with a pilot versus what the anticipated traditional taxes would be on that project built in the future.
Because it would never
And the reason is because it would never be built otherwise. The presumption is that the developer needs a financial incentive to get this project off the ground. And without that financial incentive, the project's not going to be built, you're not going to see new construction. So you can't compare what would otherwise be a fantasy, hey, let's hope this project's going to get built without any sort of kickstart, because theoretically, if it could, it would have been built already. So the fair comparison is what is being generated tax-wise on what's on that property today, and then compare it to what will be generated through pilot in the future if it happens. And under that scenario, that's what I was talking about, where a municipality, in my experience, has always wound up on the greater side of the ledger with a pilot in the future versus traditional taxes.
And let's just use the project in the middle of the town, because we've already worked out the pilot agreement on that. And don't hold me to these numbers exactly, but I think our part of the taxes for those buildings that used to be there was, our piece the town got, was $27,000. Don't hold me to those numbers, but they're close to that. The first year of the pilot, again, don't hold me to the number, I think it's $350,000 we get. The 30th year of the pilot, we get $1 million. So we went from 27,000 or 30,000, whatever it was, to $1 million on the 30th year, with an acceleration between those years from, year 1 to year 30. It accelerates as we move through, every 10 years, every 15 years, whatever the agreement was worked out. So that's why a lot of these towns are taking advantage of this, because For a small town with no industrial park, this is how you're gonna make up a tax revenue in an area to make up some money. We're talking about big numbers for a small town.
Isn't that based on anticipated occupancy, though?
It's a guarantee.
That is based upon the
It is.
revenue that will get brought in.
Based
Yeah,
on an
yeah,
annual
it's
audit
based
on
upon-
anticipated occupancy.
But there's a guaranteed,
Yeah, that project does have a guarantee. So the way financial agreements work is that you have to base, you have a minimum, which is always the taxes that were paid on the land and improvements the year prior. And you have to calculate what the annual service charge would be as a percentage of the revenue. But there's also a gap, and it allows you to say, or compare it to something. And so the deal that the mayor was just talking about has, the minimum is really two things. It is the land, it's taxable paid on the land improvements before it's built, 27,000, or the 350,000, which then goes up in percentage, or the percentage of the revenue. And if that percentage of the revenue is greater than the 350, then that's the number that they get. That's how that was structured. And that was a part of you, because financial agreements have to get approved by this body by ordinance. So it was discussed by Mike Fabrizio, myself, consultant that Michael had, but then obviously, it only can get approved by you. But that's how that had. I had forgotten about that aspect. There's that other minimum. So on that one, you can always negotiate. It's not simply the revenue. That you can define a floor other than simply the percentage of revenue.
And if they default, you could have the same remedies. I'm not familiar, I didn't analyze the pilots from that perspective. That was a very good question. The remedy for default, for not paying your annual service charge, probably mirrors.
Two ways. One, it's the same as not paying your taxes, or two, you could lose the agreement altogether. So that's how the provisions that
So you
work.
could foreclose, like you could on anyone else, and then you could
They could lose the
void.
benefit. They could lose the benefit and have to pay the otherwise applicable taxes, yes. That's how that provision works. So if they breach that agreement, you have the same, if someone doesn't pay the normal taxes, you have the same lien. Basically, it's defined the exact same way, or they could lose it. And so that huge financial benefit that they got could disappear. So they have an incentive to pay.
all right, if I'm gonna give you another question.
But to the point that the council president had raised, the income does fluctuate with how much they get. If they get, a vacancy and then the rent.
Above that minimum.
Yes.
So-
That's exclusive to that agreement. There are other pilots that don't have a minimum floor.
I think the pilots can be individually negotiated. The one that was talked about that, that everybody sees getting billed across from like Colonial Theater, that one has the minimum of about 350. I think every agreement is different. You have some standard stuff, you want the percentage of the revenue, but then it's like any other agreement, what's your leverage? What can you get out of it? How much is it going to, what cost will it generate? So that's all part of it. That deal, we wanted a minimum, we got a minimum. So, or you wanted a minimum, sorry.
I want to thank you, obviously shedding a lot of light on some questions that we've had for a number of years. So you mentioned foreclosure, and it clicked with me. We have a property down on Wanacue Avenue. I believe it's 223 Wanacue Avenue, the CJM building. That is a blight because the current owner evidently decided to take what was quite a beautiful building and a functional building down under the pilot. I believe there's a pilot for that, and it hasn't been put up in around 4 or 5 years. So how do we effectively handle a property like that, where the property owner has a pilot, has an obligation to pay whatever, increases that you were suggesting, but it hasn't, it's left the property like a World War II destruction site.
Did they not post a bond to cover default on that
How do you
project?
handle that?
Few questions here. The bond, are you talking about a performance bond for construction?
But yeah, and that's probably what, I was assuming that all these have performance bonds.
No, a performance bond is, it is a great tool if you can get it.
If you can get it.
If you have, if you have 3 or 4 redevelopers that are chomping at the bit, and they want a piece of property and they're bidding on it, you have the leverage to do it. Pompton Lakes, one of the next slides is why you chose to go through redevelopment agency. One of the reasons you chose to do that is the light designation happened in 2008. Nothing happened for 7 years, not a single agreement. So the Mayor Cole and the council at the time said, nothing is happening. We need something else. We need a dedicated board to do this and go forward, because nothing was happening. And really what that falls back to is there wasn't a lot of leverage. If you have the power of eminent domain, take property, or it is, become a real popular place, absolutely you can negotiate it, but that is a question of leverage. At the time, when that was done, that was another one of the pieces of property out in Montague that you are trying to get redeveloped. You didn't have the leverage to force it. I seriously doubt that would have been signed if they had a guarantee that they were going to do it. They were, they're going through financing. That's a challenging financial place for a few different reasons, some of which have been discussed, so I can't talk in detail about it if you go to the redevelopment agency sometimes, but there are steps being taken by the redevelopment agency to enforce what rights they have, to compel those things. To the extent the condition of that property is a danger or has animals and things like that, that's a good enforcement issue that can be done. There is a schedule in the redevelopment agreement, so again, I can only say in general, there are steps being taken to.
And the code enforcement has just written tickets already over there. Also, that building could be built without a redevelopment pilot because he owns the property just outright if he wanted to build it. So he would have been in the same process if he just didn't go with the pilot and just built it on his own. It would have been the same thing.
So in addition to the project that does look to date that it has been successful, what would the provisions that we could have put in place on the CJM building to have avoided what we're looking at now?
Could have been put in place. If you have leverage, you can put a lot of things, but when you don't have eminent domain, and you had years and years and years of nothing happening, the leverage is, you're hoping things get done. So one of the things you're providing is financing. I didn't say had, and that's your decision. You made the decision to provide a pilot because of it. Nothing was getting built without some financial incentive. You can, if you could get it, you can get guarantees and bonds. If you have no financial leverage to force that, you can't. It's really it's a product of what leverage you have to compel certain things to happen. You're trying to get it to happen.
I guess my question is, what was there before, albeit we're considering it blighted, looks better than what's there now. So what could we do, this being a lesson learned as that being an example of an unsuccessful project going forward as we continue to redevelop to prevent something like that from happening again?
Well, it's not it's still in the process of being built. I mean, he did not walk away from this project in any shape or form. He's having issues right now with his engineer. He has engineers on
The
staff.
question was before we got to this point, not what we're doing now, not fixing the problem after. The question was what could have been constructed differently in that agreement in the beginning to avoid us getting to this point now. It looks terrible.
Well, the only thing that could have happened, I guess, would have been, he had to take the whole building down, but it's he owns the building, we can't tell him how to build it.
Well, I think that what
That's not an answer.
Andy is saying is really true. When you have something that makes the demand for the property greater, then you can get contractually creative. One is the bond. The other is you could have a construction schedule that if they miss certain milestones, you impose a per day or per week fine. So you can make it very expensive for them not to do something, and you can make that expense more expensive than taking the action which they would otherwise need to remediate the problem that you have. I don't know anything about that deal that predated me. If Andy knows that you didn't have the negotiating power to do it, then you didn't have the negotiating power to do it. In the future.
In retrospect, without the negotiating power, the building would have been better off staying the way it was.
I think I know where Council President Polidori is going, but I think maybe the question's more in line with the role of the redevelopment agency and how we got to the point of granting a pilot and where it stands now. So I'm going to hold off on my question, but I think that's going to add a little clarity to to things a
The
little
pilot
bit.
is, again, that's a governing body function.
Well, okay, so I'll throw it in now. So, here's the thing, and we're looking at the pilots and redevelopment and everything like that from the perspective of the borough, what the community stands to gain. But there is two sides to that coin, and that the developer stands to make a substantial amount of money by getting this financial decision, right? And we have, whether it's substantial or
It's
whatever.
limited.
What's that?
It's limited, and if they make over X percentage by 12%.
Okay, so, but they're not doing it to help out the municipality. There's a financial incentive for them to go ahead and recapture additional value by redeveloping their project, right? We have a property owner, and the mayor's right, they can, on their own volition, redevelop their property. But somewhere along the lines, in this case, I guess it's the redevelopment agency reviews the financial ability for a developer to fundamentally go vertical on a project. There's got to be some kind of capacity of that developer to say, this is the project I want to do, and yes, I have the ability to do so, which leads to this recommendation to the Borough Council to grant that pilot agreement. That process failed in this instance. There was the developer did not have the ability to properly fund a project. In fact, they're not gaining any revenue now on a vacant property. And that inability to actually complete the project robs them of their revenue stream. It certainly has an impact on the look of our municipality. So again, I think the question is, and having, now being on the liaison or redevelopment agency, is the role of the redevelopment agency to understand the financial fundamentals of a developer to be able to effectuate the project properly, which in this case did not happen.
Yes, and then that goes back to my original question of what a provision in place to have it bonded in case the project failed, to have some financial ability to go in and recoup.
And that may not be the case, and I get the point, is we may not have had the leverage to say we're making this requirement, but I think the question becomes, it is the redevelopment agency's role to determine that developer's ability to be able to do the project properly. Otherwise, you don't recommend to the council to grant that pilot. If the developer can't do the project, why are they recommending the project to the council?
And I agree with what you're saying, I understand what you're saying. I think that the bigger concern was when he presented the case to us, he had the financing in place already to go. They did research it, it was all checked, and then COVID hit, he got set behind, and the finance went away. And now he had to get new financing. So that's where the problem is with that specific building. But when he presented the project, which is now 6 years ago, he had full financing for the project.
Okay.
I have, well, these questions are actually getting me to think a lot. Are there cross-defaulting provisions between the pilot and the redevelopment agreement?
In most of them, I believe that one too. If they default on the redevelopment agreement, that is a default, I think it's paragraph 10, section 10 or 11 of your financial agreement, your pilot. You have to be in compliance with the redevelopment agreement. If you're not, they can both be terminated. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you have that leverage.
So I think there's for me and the governing body, I mean, I'm not stopping any dialogue with Mr. Brewer. We have something we can discuss regarding this. I think you might be interested in.
And just
to close that.
To address that, what you have is what makes, one of the things that make that project valuable to the entity that has it or can sell it to a more financially capable party or get its financing is that it has a financial agreement, a pilot in place. That's a hammer that you have. If you take it away, it's less valuable for the borough and the municipality, and the redeveloper. So yes, that's there. That is a risk that they run. They know that. That's a risk. Yes. But there are cross default positions. Yes.
And since I came on board and I had communicated with you over what this process was, I understand that the former attorney didn't do the redevelopment work and didn't take on the pilot agreement, which is traditionally a governing body.
It is always a governing body approval.
Typically, the borough attorney does it, and we discussed, and one of the things that we might want to think about in the future is that we have our own process to have a financial analyst evaluate pilots in the future, not only to qualify the developer as being real and financially solvent and able to do the things they're saying they're going to do, which is a rightful concern here, but to also look at the pro formas and make sure that they're not overestimating the cost of construction, that they're not over projecting their projected rents. When you end up going through this analysis, I understand the governing body may not have done this under the former process, but I typically, whether I'm on the developer side of the table or the municipality side of the table, I get pro formas that are pages and pages long that show all of the projections. And in this particular market now, with inflation doing what it's doing, it's more important than ever to make sure that those are accurate. And there may be a little bit guessing involved because it's been a wild show lately, both with regard to cost of expenses, with rent coming in, but also with the projection of what traditional taxes would be if this project never went forward. Because what you ought to be doing is you ought to be comparing the revenue stream under the traditional taxes that that property is paying today and what it's going to pay over the next up to 30 years if nothing is done. And then compare that to what the pilot is. And then that information should be, shared with the body that's making the decision, and you'll know whether or not this makes sense for you. And that's something that
There was a performer, but that was 6 years ago, there was a performer done on this building.
But there was an independent analysis, is I
No,
think,
there
to
was
Mark's
not,
point.
no, and I think that's a great
the
idea.
Mark's
I'm not against that. I think that's a great idea. But no, none of the projects have had that, really.
Which to the point would also probably be paid through by escrow.
Yes.
So the borough would not, and the taxpayers would not be on the hook for any financial analysis
They're
associated.
always paid by that,
Right.
yes. And actually going through this analysis, I don't have CGM up there, and I apologize, but this is kind of taking this
I have a
back.
picture. Would you like to see the condition that it's in?
Well, it's important to focus on the whole picture, not just.
Everything,
I'm
everything.
I mean, there's obviously some
circling back
areas
to
that
why-
are not working.
Circling back to this, one of the reasons that I think that it did fall apart was COVID and everybody's supply chain and costs went through the roof. I'm not in their position, but my understanding is that that was the huge problem here. There are various financial, they were ready to go, they had their financing, everybody's costs went astronomical. I think everybody kind of knows there was a real bad financial problem with COVID, with getting supplies, everything else. That seemed to be the big, I hadn't come talking about the specific reasons why that kind of went south. I think that was the big one.
And let me just say that I think, and you could say this, that the redevelopment agency is on top, is discussing this. They've had both sessions on this. They are in talks about this all the time.
There was a letter that's
Right.
public, that's part of the BOCR that I sent out, beginning the enforcement of the rights to compel them to comply with their schedule or be at risk of losing their agreement and their financial.
Right, so they are dealing with it right now.
Yes, and yes.
And then would the taxpayer be on the hook on that?
For what?
For what? For what?
If we foreclose, I think that's what you said, foreclose? Who
Well,
would
then
take
we own
over the
the
property?
No foreclosure,
Who would take over the property?
You lien it, and subsequent title holders are obligated to pay it if they want to get clear title.
Which
Yeah,
happens
that-
downtown.
The enforcement that we're talking here is their potential loss of their redevelopment agreement and potential loss of their financial agreement.
But not their
Which makes it
property.
bad.
So
They
what,
would keep the property.
Yeah,
I'm not saying they're going to keep the property, I'm saying at the current state of enforcement.
I-
I'm sorry.
I know where Maria's going. If they default,
Mm-hmm.
we could place them on notice of default. If they don't cure, we could terminate the agreements. That makes their property less valuable.
Right.
not-
If they realize that they're facing that reality, they either, if they have the ability to finance it, will reach deeper into their pocket and realize this is something they don't want to see happening, or they may go to market to a more liquid developer to buy it out and do the right thing.
So that leverage
So-
that
And
Andy's
that doesn't have
talking
to do with
about.
the tax foreclosure issue. That's a remedy of, I would say, that's a final remedy. And I think there are things that could be done that would greatly motivate someone to protect their financial interest before they get to that point.
And the leverage Andy's talking about is just that. They have a signed agreement already, a pilot agreement, that they could turn around and sell to someone. So that makes their property worth a lot of money. If they were to lose that, that makes their property worth nothing. And to them, you know, you own this property, you want to make the most money you can, even if you build it or don't build it. So they're going to push as hard as they can to make this pilot work. And it's not a dead deal. We're talking like it's a dead deal. It's not a dead deal. All right, so we want to move on because it's going a little long.
That's right, we'll continue on a little bit. Redevelopment Agency, and again, this is the historical context. I started been in Pompton Lakes forever. I started in planning board because of DuPont environmental problems in 2011 and 2012. The bike designation happened in 2008. You got to 2014 and not a single deal had been signed. Nothing had been done. So the decision was made by Mayor Cole and the governing body at the time to form a redevelopment agency. And it was really, nothing had happened. There was a desire to have a body that was dedicated solely to that, not to other things, because 7 years nothing had happened, and to remove it one step from politics. If, you know, they're hopefully in it for 15, 20 years, getting it all done, getting it right, not worrying about elections. That wasn't my decision, so I really can't debate whether that was a good or bad, but just the historical context, those were the reasons for it. Nothing had happened in 7 years, and there was a desire to have people that were solely dedicated to that. That was the decision, so that's why that exists. So what is the role? The redevelopment agency has one of those limited new functions. It goes out to find redevelopers. Again, things haven't been happening for 7 or 8 years. Michael Fabrizio was your executive director. He also worked with your SID, so he knows the area. He works in Morristown, knows a lot of redevelopers. Worked with other, like subcommittee on the redevelopment agency to find redevelopers, drum up interest, get people interested. So promote the redevelopment area, designate a redeveloper. You have people in, I say people that generically, entities, developers in, tend to give them an interim agreement where you have like an interim period where they're paying your costs, as you said, so municipalities are paying costs to negotiate, figure out if they're a good developer, if we can get an agreement going, and then negotiate the project. As Deb said, you can, your redevelopment plan, which you draft, the governing body drafts, can be very general or it can be specific. You can say in your redevelopment plan, we want green shutters, we want 6 windows per facade, we want black shingles. You can get that specific, or you can't, or you don't have to. But the redevelopment agency is in that gatekeeping role. No one can go to the planning board for site plan approval until they get approval. That's how it's set up. So they negotiate that. What's it gonna look like? When's it gonna get built? Those protections. If we have leverage and you can require certain provisions, you do. But you can negotiate uniformity, something. So in the normal process, somebody at one end of Wanacue Avenue can put up a 2-story building that's painted purple, and somebody half-mile away can do whatever they want, has no relation. With redevelopment, the agency can require all of those buildings to, and I'm not a planner or an architect, so I'm not going to describe this right, but to all mesh right, have one unified theme, which is one of the benefits of redevelopment. So that's really the gatekeeping function, making sure that each project works with other things that you're doing. That's why one of the reasons why the governing body at the time and Mayor Cole decided to have an agency to have that continuity. That would be good, bad, or indifferent. That's the reason for it. So that's what the gatekeeping role. You decide, is this project good in the whole scheme of the redevelopment?
And you'll see that a lot I'm sorry, go ahead.
Couldn't you do that by way of just your zoning board, your zoning ordinances?
You can't require, zoning can't require, if you're just doing regular zoning, municipal land law, you can only look at this piece of property that's up. You can't say, you don't look like the other property, you're in conjunction. You can have some design requirements, but you can't require, the planning board gets an application, they can't say, we want you to look like that, that, and that. In redevelopment context, you can. You can have design requirements.
You have municipalities that have main streets that have uniformity that operate outside of a redevelopment zone?
And the question is whether or not they're mandated and their design requirements, if it so happens that, planning board can give variances from it, they don't have to. Many times when you have a successful downtown that look like that, entities want to. They're not always forced to, and they can always go get a use variance, or they can get other variances and not look like that. If it's in the best interest, they can. In redevelopment, you can compel it. You can compel a unified scheme. That's, you have more power.
And that's how the Lakeside Commons building, I think the redevelopment agency wanted it to look like the high school.
Yep.
And that's what they pushed to do, to make it look like that. If we had gone through the regular boards, we couldn't do that. We could request it or ask them of that, but we can't make them do that.
You generally can't get to that level of detail in design standards. And then one other thing that I would say is that when you're looking at through redevelopment, and a lot of those municipalities where you see these really active, vibrant downtowns, on top of that, they have a special improvement district.
Right.
Which in town, you also have one. So when those work hand in hand, that's how you get the better looking downtown.
That's through granting
Okay.
regulations.
It's a combination of both, you're doing it with very strict standards, and you're also doing it with the ability to get some grants into play. The other thing, though, with the types of improvements that you get through redevelopment are things that a lot of times you can't just ask for if they're coming in for a straight, planning board application. Like, let's say the building's too high, and you want a different type of fire engine, okay? Because you think that would serve this type of development. Or the town really needs more community space. And this is going to be a big development, like the Meridian one. So basically, in that negotiation, there was stuff for community center improvements. So you can't do that under regular zoning. Sometimes it's pocket parks or public spaces, promenades, plazas. You're able to incorporate those through redevelopment. You cannot get that through standard zoning. So those are important things, and we try when we're getting these types of developments to look at the scale and to look at what could go beyond this development, So that's important, and when you have a combination of them like this with a main street, you're able to get, property owners to work together too when you have agreements like this. So I think the idea behind redevelopment is that the town gets more bang for its buck, as well as the developer getting something out of this, the incentive or the money that they need to make a development of a certain scale work.
And going back to, just touching on what Andy said, going back to the Meridian project, we've got to remember that was, and I credit Michael Fletcher greatly on this, nobody was interested in coming to Pompton Lake, so we didn't have that leverage you were just talking about now. He was taking a chance on us, basically, by building in our town. And Michael had to sell him on the fact that take a chance on this town will do well with this redevelopment project. But they didn't have to come and want to do it right away. The other towns they could run to and want to build it in a minute. We just happen to be at the beginning stages of it. And you see it in Wayne now, and in other places are doing it.
Once that project is up and running, I know that you're not real estate demand experts, but would you predict that demand and interest in the community will be greater than what it is now?
I think if you say it's successful, they see that fills up, they want to build too. And so someone else then, they see that, there was the Lakeside and then it was Meridian. If they see that, if other developers see it fill up, absolutely, because.
So, I agree with that. My next question was, I see, I'm sitting here and I'm hearing interest in the design standards. If the governing body was interested in reviewing the redevelopment plan, they could then, with the greater demand and interest, start to impose their desires on the design standards greater than they had done previously, right?
Always there.
From what I'm hearing from you, that may not have been, the demand wasn't great enough for that to happen.
Yeah, the demand was great, and I think they decided to, it's always, I should say, this is your power. They and you decided to have less specifics and have it go through what can we get done. But a redevelopment plan can be as general as we kind of want these uses to as specific as you want. Absolutely, that's always in the power of the governing body, and it's only in the power of the governing body.
Let me ask you a question about what you're seeing from the demand standpoint then. I mean, obviously, we think that when we incentivize people to come into areas where buildings are being redeveloped, it entices other developers to come in. You see that in situations where communities are being built up, where they're surrounding, they have accessibility to robust transportation systems. Pompton Lakes is a little bit of an anomaly there because we don't really have a robust busing system and we don't have a commuter railway. Do you see that hindering us in any way?
You don't have the same access to mass transit that, let's say, us running right down the street. But what we're seeing developers coming in is that they understand where the rail and bus is and that you're in such close proximity to, let's say, the 123 in Wayne. That's a real attraction to them. So you may get the one car in the unit. You're not going to get somebody that is looking for a town where they have no car.
Where they have no car.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, but that is very enticing. And now that we have that Meridian development going in, we probably have seen 3 or 4 developers come in since, different scale developments showing interest in mixed use, just the way that downtown plan was calling for. So it's working. You know, we're seeing it, and it's little by little, but that's all it takes. You just need incremental.
You need that first one,
First one coming in the door, and then you need to stick by your guns as to the look that you want. And we just recently had one that came in, and it was just not anything close. We basically said, come back, you know, and listen to what we're telling you. You know, the town really wants to have a character that they're comfortable with.
And I would say we've said no to more than we've said yes to in over the years. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of.
Given direction.
Right.
That leads them
To one way or the other. And the other thing I would like the audience to understand too, when we talk about escrow, any charges that are put aside to do all this work, their bills, attorney's bills, that's all paid through the developers through an escrow account that they set up separately. So none of it comes out of a tax dollar to pay for any of that.
And we maintain escrow accounts for all of those projects?
Yep, and our secretary or clerks.
There were a couple where the escrow had closed because the development had closed. And Andy and I had discussed revising that escrow agreement so that in a situation where we have someone that has a pilot, that there will be an escrow that continues across the life of the pilot, because we did have 2 redevelopers that caused us to spend time and energy arguing over their financial obligations. And there wasn't, it turns out, an existing escrow that continued into the pilot after the development agreement expired.
That was just recently.
Correct. So development agreements expire upon a date or an event certain, is one more way to say it.
Certificate of completion.
Yeah, the certificate of completion being issued, which is generally substantial completion and issuance of COs. And then the only instrument that continues for the next 30 years is the pilot agreement, or up to 30 years, something less.
So that particular situation is something else we need to be mindful of going forward. Because
And we've already discussed.
And it was a good
to
catch.
address it.
It was a good catch. And look, it's a learning curve for us too. You know, this is new for us too. But yes, that's moving forward. That's something we need to address. And I'm glad both of them worked on this to make that happen. Okay, let's shoot to the end.
We're getting there.
So when, I guess, just for a point of clarity, so if someone comes to you with a development scheme idea that's inconsistent with the redevelopment plan, then it's going to trigger, it would trigger variances for height, density, whatever have you, impervious coverage, something inconsistent with the plan that they would need relief from a land use board. You wouldn't give them a rubber stamp to go to the planning board unless they were de minimis?
I don't vote at all.
Right.
My take on the board is no. They listen to what Deb can talk about more. She's more involved, she and her office with the executive director or subcommittee, looking at the initial thing. She could probably speak to that better.
Actually, I think a relevant question may be with respect to the redevelopment projects that have been developed in town. Have they deviated from the redevelopment plan? Did they need relief when they went before the planning board in any magnitude?
We do find a number of them looking at setback, setback variances. We have had the one come with height on Meridian, and that had to come back to the council to make a change like that.
So they made a change to the
That was an
redevelopment
amendment
plan
the
to accommodate
plan.
it.
Yes.
And the governing body supported that and voted on it.
Yep. And in that case, I believe that the planning board had to weigh in because it wasn't consistent with the
Absolutely.
master plan, so they weighed in also.
So that goes back to what Andy was talking about, and just for the
Everybody's
benefit of the
involved.
council and the public. Whenever there's a change to the redevelopment plan, it's the same thing as if it was it's the same process as if it was a zoning ordinance, which means you introduce an ordinance, you refer to the planning board for a consistency hearing, they come back to you with a referral, and then you vote on the adoption. Otherwise, the zone doesn't change.
Correct. Can't. Only this body has that power.
So if it's a substantial change that would necessitate a change in the redevelopment plan, it's going to come back before this governing body. If it's something that's a small adjustment for setback or buffer or something like that, you would trust the planning board that deals with those issues all the
Yep,
time.
and that power actually resides in you. So the governing body has decided to write their redevelopment plan so that an applicant can go to the planning board and get C variances or bulk variances. You could amend the plan so they're not allowed to. Everything has to be in complete conformance. Some towns do that, some towns don't. That is if the governing body wants to make sure only it sets the rules. It doesn't always happen that way, but Pompton Lakes has long now, since 2009, decided that C variances, to some extent, some C variances should be granted. Anything big always goes back, and again, I think 2 or 3 times when it was something that was going to be significant, went back to this body and you chose to amend the redevelopment plans to make it a conforming application. So the planning board, you took that decision out of it. You can, that's your choice. Take that decision out, so you made it conforming, so they didn't need a C variance.
And I'd say our firm represents probably about 50 municipalities just for planning, and very few want to deal with taking the C variance back. So that generally goes to the planning board, and we write it in that way. I mean, we could always write it.
And that's
it
their
has to go
general
back to
power
the
on every
council.
other type of site plan
Absolutely.
application.
Absolutely.
So let's just touch on real quick, and then we still got a whole meeting we gotta have after this.
This is more than 20 minutes.
Yes, just what a conceptual is. So people come with a conceptual, there's no plan involved, there's no discussion, that's kind of asking for some guidance from the board on, hey, what do you think of this idea? Is it something we should move forward with, or something we should not, or you have any ideas? But nothing written in stone about how we're doing anything.
That's a really good point, because, we've gotten some harebrained
Right.
concepts that have come before us, and basically, they've been sent packing. But I'd say, a lot of times you get a plan and they just want to come in and show you what they're thinking of to see, is this worth pursuing? If we could make this work financially, we like the town, we want to come. And that's where the discussion first starts. And then a lot of times it'll be, okay, is it ready to send it to the council, even to say, redevelopment makes sense here? Because they show up at the redevelopment agency first rather than the council. Recently, what we thought to do was to set up a technical advisory committee instead of it having to go full-blown right away. If you have a concept, let a few people see it, the planner, the executive director from the redevelopment agency, an attorney could be there. But this way, iron out a few things to see, is it even worth bringing to the redevelopment agency? Is it something that we shouldn't even be looking at? But sometimes you grab a developer and it's like, just give us your thoughts. Let us see what you have. Come to Pompton Lakes, let us talk to you. So it goes both ways. We are getting people knocking on the door now, and I think that that's positive, and I think that you want to see what they're interested in, and would it fit what we're looking for, or is it something that the council may just want to hear them out and say, you know what, we like what you're talking about, maybe it is time to make a change to the redevelopment plan.
And I know when we met with the finance committee on one of the RAD bonds that somebody was applying for, and, you know, we're talking about Jersey Cities and Hobokens and Newarks and Pattersons. The board mentioned out, as separate from the whole conversation, I think Andy was on the call, oh, Pompton Lakes, they're doing some nice work over there. You know, even though we're a tiny little town, we're getting noticed throughout the state on what we're doing here. Comparing, you know, we're not gonna be Jersey City, we're not gonna be Morristown, we're not gonna be those big towns. But we're doing what we need to do in our small town to make things better. And, you know, you look at Bloomingdale, Wanacue, they're all doing redevelopment projects as we speak right now. Wayne, they're all doing them.
Right, and, you know, some municipalities, Jersey City, they probably have over 90 redevelopment plans because they found that that's the way that it works for them.
They did away with pilots though, didn't they?
I don't know if they've done away with them, I'm not sure, but they were giving pilots, again, to get things off the ground. All those years, all that development, trying to make it different and what they wanted to see there, took a long time, it took decades. I've been doing this 40 years and I saw that evolve. I mean, you know, I think that it's important to recognize that pilots don't have to be given. I have a town that doesn't want to give pilots at all. I have a town that didn't want to do redevelopment at all until they saw what redevelopment got them. You know, so they see that the process really works. They've been watching towns all around them, like the mayor was just saying, you know, and then they're like, okay, let's take a chance on this because how do we get the look that we want? That's what they were grappling with, and that's what made them change their mind.
Like the city of Hackensack, they have catalyst and non-catalyst development project standards. So if the standard, in their particular case, they wanted more scale than what Pompton Lakes ever would want. So in order to incentivize the scale, they granted, in their plan, the ability to have more pilots, more substantial pilots, than non-catalyst projects. And I think that part of that was to motivate the initial developers to come in. I represent one of the initial developers. We had a full-blown pilot. And Hackensack, being the county hub and having the rail, they had a little bit more interest in Hackensack and developers than Pompton Lakes originally had. So, you know, I think that they had the ability to negotiate more favorable terms for the city. And they had, you know, which was something that we didn't have the ability to do. But we could use the pilots don't have to be handed out uniformly. They're not precedent setting. The governing body holds those purse strings and can consider things on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, let's wrap it up because I've got questions from the audience still.
One more slide.
One more slide, go
So
for it.
those are your powers, they don't change, they're always your powers, and planning board, there's no changes to the planning board powers. It always hears the site plan, subdivision, and every time you want to change, if you want to change the redevelopment plan, it has the same review power, it says it's consistent with master plan or not, and that's it. So those powers, planning boards, powers have never changed, and they can't.
And as we talked about in the beginning, the whole investigation is done through the planning board. The public hearing is through the planning board for that.
At this body's request.
Yes.
Yes.
And
I
that
have
comes
one more
back to
question
you.
about the retail space. Can you explain to me a little bit about the requirement for the allocation that must be given to retail and the difference between the first project that did not have retail on the bottom? Was there a reason why that one didn't have retail? And do we require at least a certain percentage of the building on the first floor to be retail? That I don't understand.
On the main level, on Wanacue Avenue, retail is
Yeah,
required.
Lakeside was different.
Lakeside is not,
So
is not, yeah.
No requirement for retail there.
Right, on Wanacue Avenue, the first floor is supposed to be
Has to be, actually.
retail or service oriented. There's a number of different uses that could go on the first, not residential.
Okay, so it has to all be at least retail on the first floor on Wanacue out-facing buildings.
Any questions from the council? First of all, I want to thank you guys before I get to the public. Thank you for taking the time. You've done some research. You've been with us both a long time and you kind of were there from the beginning. So it's good to hear somebody from the beginning. I'm going to let people separate from an opening session. Anybody have any questions just about this redevelopment? You can step up now. If not, we're going to move on with the regular meeting. Please step up. Just name and address in.
Lisa Kilbert, 158 Mountainside Drive. The pilot program, like the Meridian building, does the pilot start when the project starts or when the project is complete?
when there's a certain amount of filling of apartments is when they start paying. It's a certain number they work out. I don't know. Do you know the number offhand?
No, it typically, and I don't have it in front of me, you can, and I don't have that agreement. So you can have an agreement that can start and run 30 years, up to 30 years from completion of construction, or when you sign the agreement. You sign the agreement, that's if there's gonna take a few years to do it, and then it'll still be 35 years from the time you sign the agreement, or 30 years until you get it. The developer doesn't want to start, and we don't get a benefit. If we have the $350,000 minimum, then we want it to start right away. If it's run simply on the revenue that the rents generate, we're not gonna benefit, and they don't, we're not gonna benefit as a town until it's occupied. So it tends to start once you have a certain level of occupancy, when you have the units. COs have been issued, and there are people that are paying rent.
So right now, they're not paying the
They're-
300?
They're paying traditional.
No, they're paying regular taxes right now.
Okay, even so they're paying on the empty lot, or they're paying on what was there?
That's a good question. Under the law, they can never pay less than what they were paying the year before this starts.
Okay.
So they're gonna continue paying what they had paid historically, up through the time that the pilot payment commences.
So is that the same thing for the CJN building that has nothing?
Yes,
there?
that's
That's
a matter of law.
It does, and let's remember, they're in a rush to build it because they're not making any money until it's built. So dragging it out is not to a benefit for them. Now, CGM's a different story because they lost their financing, and they're working on that, but normally they want to get it done as quickly as possible.
They've maintained their tax payments the whole time that the project's.
They're supposed to, yes. They're obligated to. I'm not sure what their status is.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to address? Please step up.
Randy Hinton, 443 Montclair Avenue. Just a question, when the agenda for tonight's meeting was originally posted, did it include this redevelopment update?
Yes.
Yes,
It did? On the website and in the hallway?
I would say yes, but
Yes.
yes.
It was? You were talking about Lakeside Avenue, it didn't have any retail?
Right.
Well, it had the Salvation Army, it had the motorcycle shop before it
No,
was torn down.
when you're building new, there's no requirement for retail on the bottom unless it's on Wanacue Avenue.
There's no requirement for retail on Colfax
On
Avenue
Colfax,
and Lakeside Avenue,
Correct.
where the
No,
Salvation
Colfax
Army.
there is. Not on
Well,
Colfax.
It used to be there.
No, the
How
first
can you
one.
say
looks
there was
like-
no requirement?
Oh, that building doesn't. Yeah, okay.
No, there's no requirement. The only written requirement is on Wanacue Avenue.
The answer is right to the new redevelopment plan. The stuff that was there before was not constructed as part of redevelopment. The redevelopment didn't exist. So to extent, some extent, that was grandfathered. That existed before the zoning change. When the redevelopment plan changed, this body decided that on Wanacue Avenue, first floor, you gotta have retail. On things that were separate from it. Lakeside was separate from it. Again, that was a decision made by this body. So the new zoning didn't apply. That's why it wasn't there.
So this body gave up the ability to have retail on that part of Colfax Avenue?
I don't even know if they gave it up. This is a different group of people that were here, but I would suggest that they said, no, anything on the business downtown area would need retail.
A lot of people were asking questions that I probably have all written down here, but back to CJM, they are paying, that hole in the ground is paying the same property tax that the building was paying originally?
Yep.
So the taxpayers aren't suffering
No.
looking at that hole? Okay. You said in 2008, eminent domain was knocked down if we weren't able to use it?
For redevelopment, we were not allowed to use it yet.
All right.
We chose not to.
Chose not to. The mayor and council at that time chose not to use redevelopment.
Correct. The mayor and council at this time, would they consider including that in the new ordinance?
We can't change it. Once it's in the agreement with redevelopment, you can't
That's not
go
true.
back.
We would have to redo so before 2012,
Yeah, you could redo it.
a municipality could do redevelopment with eminent domain without declaring it. After 2012, if you want to use redevelopment with the powers of eminent domain, you have to start the process and declare the intention to include eminent domain within the redevelopment process. So if we were interested in including eminent domain, we would basically have to go back through the redevelopment designation, yeah, the area needs a designation, and we would have to say, we are conducting this study, and we're leaving the powers of eminent domain on the table. You have to declare now what your intent is. It's either, with condemnation or without condemnation.
And
So
right
it
from
could be
the
brought
very
back
start.
technically. You'd have to restart from right from the beginning.
Resolution.
You can't just be like, okay, we're
can't
now
go
we're
back
throwing
and
it back
write this.
in. We have to go through this whole study process all over again. So every property owner would be properly notified that that would be a consideration.
That would be a major undertaking.
It would not be worth doing.
And a
It'll
lot
also
of,
be, it functions.
Cost a lot of money.
It'll be challenging. Anybody, when your property is subject to eminent domain, some will challenge it, and it will be litigated. And that's fine. If it's done right, you have that power to do it, but almost universally, that's why you have to notice them, you have to tell them, it is a controversial subject. People don't want their property taken, or it being subject, so you're gonna have litigation.
I understand what you were saying, Mr. Mayor, about COVID and finances for this CJM project. I just can't sit here and cry though over that problem. We're in a capitalist society. You made a commitment. How long is this hole in the ground going to stay there? And what are we doing now to push him,
the
or to help
redevelopment,
him
I'm sorry, go ahead.
to develop this project?
The redevelopment agency has taken steps. They'll probably address it at the next meeting. They've sent some formal letters to him, I think, correct?
Yep.
So they're waiting, either they got responses or not, I'm not part of that, I don't know, but there are moves being made, yes.
Okay. And the part of redevelopment, does that go across the bridge and all the way to Ringwood Avenue?
If you're in the redevelopment zone, there are certain pieces that are in, certain pieces that are out.
Right.
It's mostly the downtown area, and there's certain parts of even our downtown, like Debbie had mentioned, that chose not to be in it. So there's certain areas that, yes, no, it
Yeah,
changes.
because we're all for redevelopment and we want to see the town prosper. But there are spots in town that are eyesores. I mean, across from Starbucks, there's the old Prince and Cooper gas station. It's been an eyesore for.
I think you'll be hearing about I think you'll be hearing about a redevelopment project there soon.
Oh, that's good news.
Right, and it doesn't, just remember, there were these 2 redevelopment areas that were done back in 2008, 2009, but there have been several others that are not that scale.
Right, small.
They're smaller, and there's some changes that have been made inside the existing redevelopment. So you have you don't have to stick with just one, if you find some places that need it, then we investigate again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public like to address? Seeing no one, I thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to come. We'll have you back in 3 or 4 years, and you can do this again.
Thanks much. Good evening.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's get on, moving on. Now can I have a motion to open the meeting for public comments?
So moved.
Councilman Devine, Councilman Cruz, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Anyone from the public like to address? Seeing no one, can I have a motion? Oh,
Oh, there's a couple waves now.
get your hand up.
Getting up, ladies first.
No, go ahead.
Maybe hit 4431 Clear Avenue. I had a question for you last week, Mr. Mayor. Did you get me an answer yet?
Gotta remind me of the question.
Oh, you forgot already?
Got a lot of things going on.
I know you have a lot of people. Tilcon.
Yes, I did speak to them, and he said the machine was out in force the last couple of weeks, and I've seen it. I live up that way, and I've seen it up and down
No,
the,
you don't live where I am. You live down by the river.
I could just tell
know
you-
you live. It's a dust bowl where I live.
okay, well,
Today was a nightmare. There was no.
I reached out, all I can tell you, no. They said it was been out. I've seen the street sweeper out with water almost daily, so I've seen it
I'm
there.
there every day.
Okay, well, you can
Not happening.
stop in the office then and file a complaint with them.
I can go to their office.
Sure.
You would allow me to do that?
You're a citizen, you can do whatever you want.
Because it's not getting done. So I don't know who you talk to.
Okay,
It's a dust bowl. That's open 5-6 days a week, and some days it is being taken care of, and some days, like for no rhyme or reason, why aren't they doing it every single day?
he assures me they're out there almost every day, is what he said to me.
I think his nose is growing when he's talking,
Okay, well, you could accuse him of that.
because I'm there every day. Clara Hugh Lane, any progress on it?
We're working on that.
Right here. I've been reading it.
And what's the progress?
Not yet, we're still working on it.
I have to be honest.
When we
with
have
you,
some answers, we'll get
I
back
don't
to you.
read degrees north, south. It appears as though there's a portion of this that was vacated. And I'm just gonna review that with our assessor. And I think, Mark, you might have gotten a little bit, I've seen some emails go back and forth. The title search was done by Steve Warren, or,
Yeah.
so,
It was 29
I
pages.
mean, it's quite a document.
Yeah, that's a big document.
Much
So
longer
we're
than
working
the
on it, yes.
redevelopment meeting that just took.
So from 2 weeks or 4 weeks ago, we're still.
Could be 6 weeks, I can't give you the time when it.
Now, I mean, I literally just found this email with a bunch of information in it. So, I mean, we're just trying to close the gap between, you know, my predecessor and me and everything else going on. It has not been forgotten.
Maybe in 2 weeks, we'll have a better answer.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to address? Please step up.
Daniel Tester, 52 and a half Howard Street.
Actually, keep talking, I'll do it. Just so you're on.
Oh, I'll do it. I'm down here.
Thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So a few weeks ago, I was leaving the parking lot with the Starbucks, and on the corner there was a woman who was begging for food and help with rent. So I wanted to know if there was any like programs that in this town for people who are having a hard time.
And I'm sorry to hear that. The town itself doesn't, except with the help of volunteer groups like St. Mary's, but we will guide them and move them to the county, which does have programs for them. And it could help with from food to shelter to those kind of things. All they'd have to do is stop one of our police officers, come into Borough Hall, say, I'm looking for some help. You know, occasionally I get a call or people looking for some help, and I kind of guide them to the county.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's anything that the town can do. I mean, I'm sure you're aware that the economy is not great right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just hoping that this isn't like a sign of more things to come.
I agree with you. I mean, if there's anything we could do, if they needed help, I don't know what they're looking for, we would try to help them as best we can, but to this date, no one's come forward, so I don't know. But if someone was to come forward, we would try to help them as best we can.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, you done anything else?
I'm just saying, like, it would be nice to have something in place before they ask, like, because, I mean, it's pretty predictable that people are gonna be suffering.
Well, St. Mary's has a food pantry, for example. We have some things in place already, but we don't have programs here that we're actually running because we need staff to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Anyone else from the public like to address? Seeing no one, can I have a motion to close the public session?
Motion.
Councilman Bennett, Councilman Devine. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Approval of minutes, regular meeting minutes, April 26th of 2023, closed session meeting minutes, April 26th, 2023. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Councilman Devine,
Second.
Councilman Bennett, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Consent agenda, anybody need anything removed? Seeing none, Liz, whenever you're ready.
Whereas the mayor and council of the borough of Pompton Lakes has reviewed the consent agenda consisting of borough's proposed resolutions, whereas the mayor and council of the borough of Pompton Lakes does not desire to remove resolutions for individual action from that agenda. Now therefore be it resolved that the following resolutions on the consent agenda are hereby approved. Resolution 23-20 through 23-122.
Thank you. Motion to approve the resolutions.
So moved.
Councilman Devine?
Second.
Councilman Bennett, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Introduction and first readings.
Second reading and final adoption will be May 24th. Ordinance 23-17, an ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 7 Traffic, Section 744-1, Pond Hole Parking Lot Regulations of the Municipal Code of the Borough of Pompton Lakes.
Motion to approve ordinance 2317 for introduction.
Motion.
Councilman Bennett?
Second.
Councilman Devine, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Pettit?
Yes.
Councilwoman Polidori?
Yes.
Councilman Bennett?
Yes.
So I'm not including Councilman?
No.
Okay. Councilman Cruz?
Yes.
Councilman Deline?
Yes.
Ordinance 2318, an ordinance amending Chapter 5 licenses, permits, and business regulations, Article 1, payment of taxes required, Section 1, payment of taxes required for issuance of license or permit, and Chapter 30, rental property, Article 1, rental property registration of the Borough's Municipal Code.
Motion to approve ordinance 2318 for introduction.
So moved.
Councilman Devine, Councilman Cruz. You have anything you'd like to say, or anyone?
This is I think this puts our local ordinance in line with requirements by the state. The municipal attorney can correct me if I'm wrong. It's just basically, requirements to register, rental properties through the borough and the different mechanisms associated with that, so,
And to require insurance.
and that too.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Penn?
Yes.
Councilwoman Polidori?
Yes.
Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Cruz?
Yes.
Councilman Deline?
Yes.
Ordinance 2319, an ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 28 television and movie filming of the Municipal Code of the Borough of Pompton.
Move to approve ordinance number 2319 for introduction.
Motion.
Councilman Bennett?
Second.
Councilman Devine. Councilman Bennett, you have anything you'd like to add?
Just want to thank Councilman DeLine for working on this. This is to update the ordinance so I mentioned the last council meeting, we're pursuing Pompton Lakes to become film-ready certified, and this is part of the process, to streamline the process, to get contacts, so on and so forth. And the commission, after reviewing the ordinance that was introduced by Councilman DeLine a couple of years ago, recommended some tweaks, namely waivers, I believe.
Correct.
The ability to grant waivers. I forget all the other ones that they recommended. I'll let Councilman.
Yeah, there was just three main changes to this ordinance. One is the timeline for permit review. We reduced it from 10 days to 5 days. We created a mechanism to make it faster, in which case the requester would have to pay an expedited permit fee, so it'd be higher than the normal permit fee. And then it enabled the administrator to waive certain requirements of the permit, using their judgment for a variety of factors. So those were the three main changes.
And I'll tell you how important it is. I was over in Wayne today at the Toys R Us. They are filming, unfortunately, The Walking Dead went over to Wayne to film over there. And they are filming most of their next season. A lot of it's going to be taking place from the Toys R Us site.
Wow.
And if you watch The Walking Dead, the headquarters of the New Republic is the Toys R Us building. So it's very interesting. So I'm glad we have this in place. Maybe we'll get some films done here. Okay, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Penn?
Yes.
Councilwoman Polidori?
Yes.
Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Cruz?
Yes.
Councilman Deline?
Yes.
Ordinance for second reading, they've been posted and advertised. Ordinance 23-15, an ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank.
Motion to open the meeting for public comments on ordinance 23-15.
So moved.
Councilman Deline?
Second.
Council President Polidori, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Anyone from the public would like to address just this ordinance? Seeing no one, motion to close the public session on ordinance 23-15.
So moved.
Councilman Deline.
Second.
Councilman Cruz, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion to approve ordinance 23-15 for final adoption.
So moved.
Councilman Deline.
Second.
Councilman Brennan, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Penn?
Yes.
Councilwoman Polidori?
Yes.
Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Cruz?
Yes.
Councilman Deline?
Yes.
Ordinance 23-16, an ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 2 Administration, Article 7 Administrative Policies and Procedures, Section 71, video recording of meetings of the Municipal Code of the Borough of Pompton Lake to record and broadcast the meetings of all municipal council and Borough Planning Board, Borough Zoning Board of Adjustment, and the Pompton Lakes Redevelopment Agency.
Motion to open the meeting for public comments on ordinance 23-16.
So moved.
Councilman Deline.
Second.
Council President Polidori, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Anyone like to address just this ordinance? Seeing no one, motion to close the meeting for public comments on ordinance 23-16.
So moved.
Council President Polidori.
Second.
Councilman Deline, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion to approve ordinance 23-16 for final adoption.
So moved.
Council President Polidori.
Second.
Councilman Devine, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Kim.
Yes.
Councilwoman Polidori.
Yes.
Councilman Ben.
Yes.
Councilman Cruz.
Yes.
Councilman Dewan.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Under my report, real quick, we had a meeting with our Assemblyman Jay Weber and some others involved with the Daniels Law, and the clerk, our administrator was there too, and our clerk actually was there. I think we've worked through our issues we have with that list. It was a good meeting. I thank Assemblyman Weber for taking the time out of his office to contact the office that runs this program. Like in typical fashion in the state of New Jersey, they put out programs, but they don't do enough research on how to do it before they put it out. So there were a lot of concerns and questions that really didn't get answered 100%. They're going to work on it, but I think our employees feel a little bit more confident in the fact that they can be on a Daniels Law here, be covered there, and also be covered on any non-soliciting list, which, if you're not familiar with Daniels Law, it's to protect any public servant, especially police officers, from their address being put out in case somebody wants to find them. So it's an important law because we did have some problems with this in the state of New Jersey with a judge. So that's why Daniels Law has come up again. And we also have a non-solicit list, so that caused some conflict there. I attended the river cleanup. I thought the environmental committee and Maria did a great job. A lot of people, they showed up. It was a nice day, a lot of garbage picked up. I'm sure you'll have more to talk about on that. I attended a Pompton Day ceremony, meeting. A lot going on for Pompton Day, a lot of trying to add some new things in the events. If anybody's interested, you can still get tables. There's still room. There's a couple opening spots. We're looking for groups that want to take time and spend some time in being involved there. I had a personnel committee. We had two ordinance committee meetings, one before this meeting and one last week. The ordinance committee has been very active, and I thank Eric for taking the time to do that. There's been a lot of ordinances we've been putting out lately. And that is my report. Council President Polidori.
Thank you. I once again this year hosted the Arbor Day presentation at the Lincoln and Lenox Elementary School along with Councilwoman Kent and Shade Tree Commissioner Randy Hinton. Both Principals Renee and Principal McCarthy are always so gracious in helping us put forth that program. The kids have a great time. Everybody went home with a tree. There was, in fact, a John Cena tree. There is one every year. We gave out trees to every child. We talked a little bit about tree care, the history of Arbor Day. The weather was beautiful. We were able to be outside of one of the schools. And they did present us with some thank you cards they give us every year, so they're adorable. The kids get very excited about it. I'm going to give these to you when we're done. If you want to put them on display somewhere for the shade tree, you're more than welcome to take them. Thank you for coming with me. Thank you. I also participated in the river cleanup. Again, Councilwoman Ken knocked it out of the park. I think there was representation from every group in the community. We worked very hard for most of the day to clean up. It was well attended, and it really does make the town look better when that day is finished. So thank you for I know you work very hard on that for weeks leading up to it. So thank you for doing that for us. I also want to give a shout out to Tony Massaro of the Pompton Lakes Fire Department for giving a presentation at this month's Rotary Lunch on prevention and safety for home and business fires. It was very informative. I think they're actually going to put some bullet points out that they can share publicly on what things you can do around the house to help prevent fires. On May 24th, we did finalize the details for the Lakeside Park sculpture reveal. We are just waiting for DPW to seal, coat the paint. The students touched up some of the paint that had chipped. I believe Paula has members of the county that were responsible in helping us fund part of that project, along with the students that participated and their families, open space, and of course the public. Anyone's welcome to join us. We will be giving a little speech about how that project came to be and thanking the students for their participation in it. I also want to thank the ordinance committee for completing the transparency ordinance. That was one that was particularly important to me. I do think it's incredibly important for us to have ways for our public that cannot physically attend meetings for other commitments to be able to actually stay in touch with what's going on in town. So I'm grateful that we're able to add those meetings to the YouTube link as well, so thank you for that. Let's see, I attended a dinner last night, not town-related, but I do want to take a minute to thank all first responders everywhere. I attended the 200 Club Valor Awards last night, a room full of first responders, both fire, EMS, and police from all over Passaic County. And when you listen to some of the stories that these folks tell of the life-saving actions that they take that earn those awards for them, it really is comforting to know that we have first responders across the board that are out there every day putting their lives on the line to keep us safe. So it was a very moving ceremony. I was grateful to be there. Thank you to all of our first responders for everything that you do. And I would like to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Devine.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick update. Yesterday, the Trails Committee met. We do have a couple of trails maintenance days coming up, that being May 13th, which I believe is this coming Saturday, and May 21st, which is the following Sunday. We meet at 10 a.m. at the Willowfield parking lot. Bring any hand tools you have, preferably no power tools, gloves, garbage bags will be provided, just again, trying to clean up the trails. But thanks to the river, I know, exactly, it's gonna be a pretty couple boring trail days, but, you know, the annual river cleanup it's just an amazing event every single year, and I know Maria and Julie Donkos and Stephen Bagg and EPC really puts their heart and soul into it every year, and more it shows, and it's great to be part of that every single year. So, you know, congratulations to all the hard work that committee put into. One last thing on the trails is Sunday, June 4th, National Trails Day is coming up. I will hopefully announce what the program is at the next council meeting. We're just trying to button some things up. But as we've done in previous years, we are trying to celebrate National Trails Day, and it's going to be this Sunday, June 4th. Last thing is the ordinance committee. Obviously, you just saw that we are pushing out quite a bit of ordinances right now, and I know it's been a topic of conversation related to the boating events and parks, park events ordinances that has been moved forward. It's just in draft. I think the council should probably see it relatively soon. Just making sure a couple things jive, and then hopefully we'll be introducing it next council meeting, if not beginning of June. And then I know we've been getting emails about the pet store. It's just a matter of where it fits properly into our existing municipal code. But I think we'll be probably moving that forward in a near future as well. So, and that concludes my report, Mayor.
And, you know, the Trails Maintenance Group, we put that as a new group because they work so dedicated to what they do. You know, they don't miss a time, they're always out there. I know a bunch of people on this council are always involved in doing it, so I gotta thank them all. It's a lot of hard work for a group of volunteers, but we have the best volunteers here in Pompton, so it doesn't surprise me. Councilwoman Kent.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just was informed by our clerk that the Passaic County folks are coming to Pompton Lakes, and they will be here on Friday, May 12th, and from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and they're going to distribute radon test kits for free. I would strongly advise anybody who's concerned about radon in their home is to come and get a kit. Do you know how many they're going to have, or?
He said he'll have enough.
He'll have enough?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's posted on Facebook as well.
It's up, okay.
And the website.
All right, so I take advantage of that. That's a nice offer. Okay. I want to thank the redevelopment group, Mr. Brewer and Deb. I didn't get her last name. Lawler. Okay, that was very interesting, and I'm glad they came. And I think it's a long time. We should have done this a long time ago, but I'm thrilled that they came now. And I do support redevelopment, and I also would support having input into making changes or amendments for the future. Just make sure we do the right thing, and make sure that anything that we did miss that we can actually change. I wasn't sure that could happen, but I was very happy to hear that we actually can, and we do have some interaction with that group. So I'm very, very happy to hear that. So I thank them very much. Okay, now we get into a little tough area. I attended the Flood Advisory Board meeting, and the board is extremely concerned about the redevelopment or the construction of the Dawes Highway Bridge and not having it change in its size or its design. So the board put together a Dawes Highway Bridge resolution request to the mayor and council. May I read it? The Pompton,
Okay, sure.
the Pompton Lakes Flood Advisory Board requests the mayor and council pass a resolution concerning the redesign of the Dawes Highway Bridge. This bridge's current design and existing abutments constrict the flow of the Ramapo River and increase flood risks to the adjacent neighborhood. Redesign of the bridge as part of the Passaic County's proposed reconstruction project must alleviate or mitigate adjacent and upstream flooding effects. The Borough of Pompton Lakes has invested significantly in increasing flood resiliency and in flood mitigation projects in the vicinity of Dawes Highway and the Ramapo River. The chances of significant flood events are increasing, as demonstrated by the Rutgers SAP report and the soon-to-be-released NJDEP Inland Flood Protection Rules. Allowing the reconstruction of Dawes Highway Bridge without modification of the hydraulic opening to accommodate future climate-adjusted flood events is a disservice to Passaic County residents in the floodplain of the Ramapo River. We, the Flood Board, respectfully request the mayor and council pass a resolution to communicate the above statement to the Passaic County engineer and all of the county commissioners. Signed, Lauren K. Venon, chairwoman of the Flood Advisory Board, and that was unanimously voted on by all the members.
So Paul, if you want to address, we did ask him, we did bring this up when we spoke to him, and he said...
Yeah, this is not the first time.
Yeah,
We brought this up for discussion.
No, I
But we
also-
spoke to the engineer, and they're saying we're changing the flow of the water, and we can't do that. So they will not change the bridge. We want them to, we asked them to.
Do we have any recourse? I mean,
So I did speak to Jonathan about, I forget what Zoom call I was on, probably about some of the other bridges they're doing, about bringing in Joe Scupion or Scupion. He is the well-known,
And we've used them.
Yeah,
I guess he's the GOAT of hydraulic
hydraulics.
studies.
Mhm.
So I'm going to get on that. I did tell Jonathan, he goes, yeah, you got the right guy. So I said, I'm going to talk to him about, what it is this borough desires.
Right. So, yeah, we've pressed them, and they keep coming back saying they can't, so we'll press them again, but...
Well, they're asking for a resolution. So, I mean,
Well,
it's up to the
the
board.
resolution has to be passed through the attorney and the administrator and everybody else.
Right. So,
Can't just read it
okay.
down.
Do you actually submit it to me and I'll work it out?
Yeah, I'll email to you, no
Okay,
problem.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay. Yeah, I attended the Shade Tree Commission. The Shade Tree Commission commissioners are actively engaged in removing some of the predetermined dangerous trees, and they're also looking for upcoming plantings. And the Shade Tree Commission is sponsoring the Arbor Day essay, which includes the Lincoln and Lenox Elementary fifth graders. Their essays were submitted, and all of the commissioners now, including me, are reading their essays and deciding which one should be the selected as the winning. I think there's two, possibly three winners. These winners will be announced at our next council meeting, I believe, Liz, at 7:30. And the students will come to the council meeting and they will read their essays in the council chamber. And they did that last year, and they've done it for a few years now. It's quite adorable, and they're very proud of their work. So we'll welcome that project. I want to thank the Shade Tree Commissioners for that project. I also attended I believe it was the 8th annual Arbor Day was it 8th annual, right? The Arbor Day tree planting, I think it was the 8th. I think that's what they said, the third graders. And as Councilwoman Polidori said, it was really a lot of fun. And Mr. Hinton talked about very interesting information. The truth is, the kids really actually enjoyed it and listened, even though we were freezing outside. When they took the trees, the little baby trees, they named them, and council president announced all of the names, and some of them are really weird, and some of them are really cute, and some, it's kind of interesting to be involved with that. It's like, okay, but.
There were a lot of Bobs.
There were a lot of Bobs. There were a couple Lincolns, and, but they were cute, anyway, and that's what it's all about. It's all about having fun and understanding them, so thank you very much for that opportunity. I met with the bid trustee, Val Cole, for the river cleanup, and we did look at downtown, uptown pond hole areas that are inundated with litter. I do believe that our borough has to have a better litter program, either an enforcement program, because when you see the litter downtown, it's very unacceptable to me. And I really feel it has impacted some of the kids in the CTO program that we had, because one of the biggest things they talked about was litter and the parks and picking up garbage and stuff. And so when the high schoolers see it, I think we have to take a better view of it. So I'm going to offer the EPC to work on a new litter ordinance and I'll work with our attorney on that. I also attended the Board of Health meeting. Thank goodness there's no regulations. Everything is standard as it is, and we have some pretty good compliance with clean restaurants. So that was very, very nice to hear. We had the 20th annual townwide river cleanup. Perfect weather, sunshine, no injuries. To me, that's a perfect day. We had some very special people come to town. First of all, we have our usuals, our recreation director, Karen Murphy, always helps out with the event. We had the Lakeside School principal, Jake Hernico. We had Senator Joe Panaccio and Assemblyman Brian Bergen took out time from their day just to come and meet the cleanup crews. We actually had 5 different counties that were represented here from various volunteer groups, from businesses such as Verizon and a couple other businesses that get our information on their social media. So it really is a big deal. It's turned into a quite big deal, and it's extended beyond Pompton Lakes. We also had the Pompton Lakes High School FBLA Club students come, and the Pompton Lakes Environmental High School Environmental Club, and other students and other families from around the area. So we had a wonderful experience, and I do have to mention our sponsors, because if we don't have sponsors, this program doesn't happen. Again, Columbia Savings Bank, and they had a very generous donation of T-shirts and tote bags, which was from Gene Hoffman, the branch manager. Our Business Improvement District to the bid, and Rob, he was here a minute ago, he also showed up with Sue Barone and Val Cole, and everyone who attended all got bid bucks, and the students got them, and even people from the outside the area said, oh, I want a bid buck, I want a free cup of coffee, and they got one. Val Cole also designs the T-shirts, and she always does a beautiful job. This year, a radio station, WGHT 1500, Ryan Gossiker, he provided free air commercials for us for about 2 weeks, and he did a beautiful job with that, and he is our coalition coordinator now, so he's very involved in Pompton and the ability to keep a good environment. Our Clean Communities Grants Office always helps out with the funding of this. The ice cream station provided free ice cream coupons, and everybody wants those. And they also baked a beautiful homemade earth cake, which was absolutely gorgeous, and those pictures are on the social media. Council President Polidori provided usable water bottles, and that goes hand in hand with the new water system that we have, the filtered water, drinking fountains? Refillable fountains with the drinking water. Frank's Pizza and Tony's Touch of Italy also were very generous with their donations. And then, of course, special thank you to the supporters of the cleanup. We have our mayor, Mike Serra, council president, Polidori, and all the council members, Eric, I know Bobby couldn't make it, and I know Bill couldn't make it, and our Councilman Venon all attended and cleaned up, and all their hard work was all documented on the photos. Our superintendent, Dan O'Rourke, and the DPW crew, They went out there and they cleaned up all of the bags. As far as I know, I think they missed one spot in the pond hole, but I got them to go out there. They will go out there tomorrow. So if you see any plastic bags or something that doesn't belong, just let me know or Dan O'Rourke, and they will go back out there again. Our Columbia Bank volunteers were very good. There was a number of them out there, and they also clean up, and they do that year round, so not just for our cleanup. And of course, our OEM coordinator, Al Evangelista, did a tremendous job on Ringwood Avenue. Thank you, Al. It's clean again. And I want to thank, again, all the volunteers for their stewardship of the earth and the environment. And most important, I have to thank the members of the Environmental Protection Committee and Chairman Steve Begg. He's awesome. He does an amazing job. Julie Donkos has been doing this for 25 years with me and even longer. Mike Meeker, who is our IT guy, he's also our social media guy. He's the one who got this flyer out and about all over the state of New Jersey. Chris Sudel, Bernadette Chilomini, Mike Shakatana, which is in the back, he carries everything around, strong guy. And of course, I thank everyone. We also had Shade Tree Commissioner Randy Hinton out there. That's right. And thank you very much, Randy. And there's a couple other people that were there I probably missed, and I do apologize. But it was really a great day. And I think we had 1,500. We had about 1.5 tons of waste collected by our DPW. That tonnage goes directly to our CRS program for removing debris from our floodplain and rivers. And it also goes to our Clean Community grants because they want to know how much material we remove, and that helps us get more money from grants from the Passaic County folks. So it all plays into, betterment of the community and for grant monies. And I just want to say, I'm sorry I have to say this, but I'm directing this to our attorney, Mark. I'm very sorry that you felt you could not give me a heads up on what that ordinance or that resolution that you had discussed earlier this morning, or earlier at this meeting. I had no idea that was coming up. This is a very private matter. Councilman Begg is a private person. I've known him for 35 years. I would never do anything to hurt him. But when I look at an agenda, which I get every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, I look at every resolution and I read every ordinance before I vote on it. And I did not see that. I did not see that.
This was a motion.
You know what you...
I did not know. And I feel that is your job, and I'm talking to Mark, it is your job to advise us, not a few of us, all of us. So I'm very disappointed in you. I'll be honest with you. And I've known you for years. I'm very disappointed and I'm very upset. I'll be honest with you. I would never vote against anything like that. But I have an obligation to know what I'm doing. Now, and that always, sometimes people don't like that.
Council President, that's not my role to do. Not Council President, Councilwoman Kent.
Then you should have just let me know this was coming up. Other people knew.
No other people.
Nobody knew.
Mayor knew.
The mayor
Because
knew
it was
because the
speaking to his
administrator patched her in. There was an administration issue that I had discussed with the...
Actually, that was discussed earlier between other council people before we came into this meeting.
Yes, I mentioned it at a meeting
Not
right
me.
before.
We all should have known.
Everybody should have known.
That's- You're placing the duty, I haven't informed any council person of agenda items. That's what the administration's role is if they're going to do it. In the administration's defense, this issue, while it has been ongoing, wasn't brought to me with respect to the magnitude of concern until today. And when I looked at the statute, I think, what time was it? It was around 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. That I realized you absolutely have to do it tonight. This is your last chance to do it before the 8-week period passed. So,
I have a phone.
The mayor should have let
Somebody should have let me know.
everybody has a phone.
There was no
but
decision
I
made.
think that every person up here that has worked with other attorneys and has also worked with me over the past year and a half will at least acknowledge that that's not the role of the attorney. The attorney doesn't sit there and advise individual council people of agenda items.
All I know is that other people knew about this. This is a serious private matter. And you asked me to vote, and you asked me to vote in
Councilwoman
public.
Councilwoman Kent,
It's my,
I'm in discussion with his son about it daily.
well, I don't know what you do, Mike.
Okay,
I'm
and maybe
talking
he doesn't
about,
want anybody else to
well,
know.
then you don't put it in public. We should have talked
It has
about
to be in
it.
public. It has to be by law in public. It has to be in law, by law in public.
What is this? I'm done. Sorry.
Thank you. Councilman Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Councilwoman Kent for setting up the river cleanup. It's been 20 years this year?
20 years.
20 years. So it's a very long time, and all the folks that helped make it happen. As mentioned earlier, the film ordinance was updated to make it more streamlined and flexible to entice film crews to look at Pompton Lakes. And so of the 5 steps required to become film certified, we are on step 5, which is to submit a list of local resources. They're specifically looking for caterer, food trucks, restaurants, office space, lodging or hotels, lumber hardware stores, office supplies, car rental, or security services. There's a whole bunch of other categories as well. If you go to nj.film.gov, production tools, and then production services directory, there's a option there to enter your business information. It's about $20 to register your business, but I think it's a good investment to get your business listed on that directory. $650 million were spent in New Jersey in just 2022. Netflix and Lionsgate are both building studios in New Jersey, one in Fort Monmouth, Netflix, and Lionsgate is building one in Newark. The short-term disruption that may be caused by filming in Pompton Lakes outweighs the long-term benefits. Folks, there's a thing called film tourism, where folks come from all over to be in the spot of their favorite movie, and I think this is a very good way to help stabilize taxes in Pompton Lakes and attract more businesses as well. So that is my report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Cruz. You got a bunch of motions, you can do them first, last.
I'll go through the report, it's not that long, and then I'll do the motions afterwards. Thank you, Mayor. Last night I attended the Board of Education meeting, where the Department of Special Services gave an overview of the Children's Place. For those of you that don't know, that's the autism program. Now, the autism program began in 1999, and it started off with one student. Now over, I guess, the 20-plus years right now that it's been in place, their program now covers K through 2 and grades 3 through 5. The primary goal for the summary last night is more for the newest members of the Board of Education. Public obviously was there. They kind of do a curriculum report every year, but it was really nice to see, the progress of a lot of the students. One of the things that was very fascinating that I was not aware of, or I do not remember from a prior report, is that the students obviously learning life skills as they progress through the program. They go through a location called Lifetown. Now, Lifetown is a simulated indoor city for children and adults, and they're given $11. And with the $11, they get to pay for different services, buy ice cream, rent a bike, and they go through all this as part of, as they go to learn what it is to be an adult and what you use money for. So it was a very fascinating presentation given last night, and it's great to see how the program itself has grown over the years. And Pompton Lakes and the program itself is a go-to for many of the districts outside of Pompton Lakes. So it's not just Pompton Lakes, it's many out-of-town districts as well. I'm not sure if it was mentioned at the last meeting, Mayor, but our beloved principal and probably longest tenured principal. I just want to pull up some background on Dr. P because he's amazing. So Dr. P has been with the high school for about 18 years. He's the longest tenured principal. I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to meet him. He's fantastic. He's great with the kids. He's very articulate. When he goes up to speak, everybody's listening to Dr. P. And, just over the years, just an amazing individual. And I was shocked to hear that he was resigning.
Retiring, right?
Oh, retired, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, you know. But I just want to give a brief background on Dr. P, as we call him. So he became the principal of Pompton Lakes High School in '05. From the very first day, he made it clear that he was a student-centered leader, committed to making the high school a special place for all who attended. During his 18-year career in this key position, he has touched thousands of lives, developed a program in place that is home to students and staff alike. Dr. P will retire as the longest tenured principal in the history of Pompton Lakes High School. He'll be greatly missed as he begins the next chapter of his life. And that doesn't even does it justice, just for his career and just where he's been as a Pompton Lakes principal. And I wish him the best. I do, and that'll do it for my report. And I did
not know he was the longest tenured principal.
Yes,
I know that.
yes, and you would not know it. I mean, he's just a great guy.
Yeah, good, great guy.
I do have a couple of motions here. All right, first motion. Motion to approve request for the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the U.S. John Hand Tri-County Post number 2906 to conduct the annual Memorial Day Parade sponsored by the John Hand Tri-County Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 2906, and the Borough of Pompton Lakes on Sunday, May 28, 2023. Parade to assemble at 10:45 a.m. at the intersections of Lakeside and Jefferson Park, Jefferson and Lakeside Avenues. Parade will then commence its route following the services and ending at the VFW Post 2906 located at 261 Wanacue Avenue, where refreshments will be served. The police department will temporarily close the route. Portions of this route include county roads, notify police, fire, and first aid.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Councilman Devine, all in favor?
Aye.
Against, okay.
All right. Motion to approve request to allow the Pompton Lakes Girl Scout Troop number 96380 to hold a Girl Scout camporee at Hirschfield Park on May 20th, 2023 from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Notify police, fire, and first aid.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Councilman Devine, all in favor?
Aye.
Against?
And the last motion to approve request from Lakeside Middle School for a portion of Lakeside Avenue to be closed to traffic between Mandeville Street and Grand Schuler Avenue to allow students and parents to access Lakeside Park prior to the 8th grade dance on June 8th, 2023, from 3:30 p.m. to 5:15 p.m.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Councilman Devine, all in favor?
Aye.
Against. And just to follow up on that, since he's brought it up, since our Councilman Cruz, Sunday, May 28th, 2023, Memorial Day Parade. The services start at 11:30. Parade takes route and ends up at the VFW. It stops at the War Memorial. It starts at the War Memorial over on Lakeside by the bridge. If anybody's interested, please line up. The parade route will go down to Colfax, down Colfax, and back through town, and then into the VFW at all. It's always a great day. Hope it's a beautiful day, and hope a lot of people are out there supporting our veterans. Professional reports. Report.
No.
Minister's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to let the council know that the borough engineer, the DPW superintendent, Dan O'Rourke, and I went out to 1102 and 1104 Colfax. We met with the residents there. We took a look at the situation that was brought to our attention. The stormwater line is going to be TV'd on Friday. So there's going to be a couple options here. It's going to be a challenge to address this matter, I will say. So until we have a full evaluation, we won't know the exact cost and how we're going to remedy the situation in that area. Also, we received a letter from Mayor Dale. He is the mayor of Township of West Milford. On April 12th, there was the Canals fire that took place, and he is thanking all of the mutual.
It's a woman.
Oh.
Michelle Bell.
Oh, Michelle, excuse me. I saw Michael. It's a little late.
It's okay.
All right, in any event, she thanked all of our first responders. Without first responder help, this fire was contained by April 15th. This fire destroyed 972 acres of the Newark watershed located in West Milford. It is known as one of the largest fires in the past decade. So it's just again to Council President's statement, Where would we be without our first responders? And these first responders, many of them are volunteer. So, I mean, big thank you to them. And just, we're gonna be going more continuation of replacement of bridges in the town, the replacement of the DuPont Place culvert. I'll be sending out the RFP for that. The borough's responsible for the engineering, the county's getting funding from DOT for the construction.
Sure.
We will be responsible for the engineering design and, I believe, construction oversight.
Which is not it's not cheap.
It's going to be a lot, so.
This is the Orphan Bridge over on DuPont. No one has taken responsibility for it. County, us, or DuPont, no one is accepting it. So the deal that was worked out with the county was we will do the engineering, they will purchase it and install it, and then be responsible for taking care of it as we move forward. Any questions from the administration? Nope? Okay. Motion to open the meeting for public comments.
So moved.
Council President Polidori, Councilman Devine, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Anyone from the public like to address? I see lots of hands. I'll go with Al in the back first, since he wasn't asked before, but then you're next.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This young man in the back, his question prompted me to come up here this evening. As many of you might know, I attended the Emergency Preparedness Conference in Atlantic City 2 weeks ago, sponsored by FEMA and New Jersey State Police. And one of the sessions I attended was about 211. Now, I think everybody's heard of 911, and there's also 211, there's also 811, and I think the other one, the latest suicide hotline, I'm not going to quote it because I forget it, but it's a 3-digit number as well. But if you will, just allow me very quickly to go through 211. I did say I was going to post it on the Emergency Management Facebook page, which I will do. And then I will send it to Michael Corelli and our Borough Clerk to post it as they see fit on our social media. How 211 works, it works like 911. Calls to 201 are routed by the local telephone company to a local or regional calling center. The center's referral specialists receive the requests from the callers, access databases of resources available from public and private health and human service agencies, match the caller's needs to available resources, and link them directly to an agency or organization that can help. And here's the types of referrals. Basic human needs, including food, clothing banks, shelters, rent assistance, utility assistance. Physical and mental health resources of all types. Work support, including financial assistance, job training, drug and alcohol prevention, so forth and so on. Access to services in non-English. Okay, they do have language lines, so if they call, they'll get the appropriate language, and it's a plethora of languages. Anyone can call and be helped as they see fit or as the need is. Support for older Americans and persons with disabilities, including adult daycare centers, community meals, respite care, home health care, transportation, and homemaker services. Children, youth, and family support, and then suicide prevention. So this is available at 211.org. If someone wanted to go to that site, they would get all this information, and I'll send that out also to our appropriate groups. Pardon me?
It is on the website.
It is on the website, terrific. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, may I? The suicide hotline is, the national one is 988.
988 is National Suicide Hotline, 988. Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public like to address? I think you had your hand up. Good.
Daniel Tastron, D2.5 Howard Street. At the river cleanup, we just left the bags of garbage on the side of the street, and the town came and picked it up. If I wanted to do a litter pickup myself, where would I dump the garbage?
You mean from the town or from your own home, or?
No, just around town.
Oh, yeah, then you would have to take it back to your home, unfortunately. Or, I mean, if it's a big enough bag, you make a call to the administrator and she would get it
We
picked
can
up for you.
coordinate that, if that's something you'd like to do. We can coordinate a drop-off point so our staff can pick it up on the next working day.
Okay.
Just make a call over and if
I was just wondering if there was a place that I could go to dump it, or if I should leave it somewhere.
No, we can, like the river cleanup. There are staged areas for the garbage, and wherever area you're cleaning up, we could recommend a good location for that.
Gotcha. Who do I contact?
Me, you can call me, Paul.
The information is on the borough website. You have all the contact information there.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I saw another hand. Is that you? What up?
Randy Head, 443 Montclair Avenue. I'm speaking for Shade Tree. It wasn't in your report, but I want to thank you for coming to our Shade Tree meeting.
I forgot to mention.
And swearing in our new Shade Tree Commissioner, Alexa Reed, to a 5-year term. We've been looking for more help at Shade Tree for the longest time, and she stepped forward and volunteered. And I want to thank you for coming in and swearing
And she's
her.
not quite your age, so she'll do well.
Hopefully, she'll be there the next.
She's a lot younger.
God bless her, as long as she wants. Also, for the people that are down into Hirschfield Park, Shade Tree, we just removed 11 ash trees from Hirschfield Park alone. So, and a lot of the ash trees in town between Pine Street and Central are all dead in the yards. I'm just telling the homeowners that they really need to take care of them, you know, because the emerald ash borer, Downs Tree Service told me today that Fairlawn's looking to remove 200. So this emerald ash borer insect is going through our area and is causing a lot of damage. Also, there's a oak leaf scorch, which is affecting oak trees now. So right now, there's an oak tree in the park, Hirschfield, that he suggested I remove, but I want to have Dan O'Rourke come down. I just don't want to make these decisions on my own anymore. It's getting ridiculous. And there's an oak tree at the first aid spot. That, of those 6 oaks that are right there, just didn't leaf out. You don't know until this time of spring before a tree leaves out or doesn't leaf out. And when it doesn't, it's time. So also, Councilman Brennan had a post about last year he had gotten some red buds, and it got quite a lot of activity, I gotta say. And but he hasn't got any more red buds now. He's going to try to get some more. But anybody in the town that wants a tree in front of their house, please go through the Shade Tree application process up in the Borough Hall, so that we have some kind of consistency on what's going on. So just a few things on Shade Tree I just wanted to say. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to address? Seeing no one, can I have a motion to close public session?
Motion.
Councilman, who was that? Lennon, Council President Polidori. Privilege of the floor. Anybody have privilege of the floor?
Real quick, Mayor. I want to congratulate my friend and longtime, he was a football coach. He's been named the new Ridgewood High School head football coach, Torrey Watson. Congratulations to him, and congratulations to my former high school football coach, Chuck Johnson, on 38 years in Ridgewood.
Thank you. I'd like to wish everybody a happy Mother's Day, and thank you all for attending. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Councilman Devine, Councilman Bennett. Thank you, everyone. Yes. Yeah, you're taking it right back.
You use it.
You use it.